fascinating split between the two education associations in the state, one of them siding with Chris G and one with Sisolak, and how they themselves have been producing content and campaign ads on behalf of these candidates. So it's been brutal, not just directly between the candidates, but between these outside groups who are supporting them as well.
There's been a ton of money spent in this race, a lot of it by outside groups. If that money had not been spent by the state teachers union on behalf of Chris June Kiliani, she wouldn't even have been competitive. And Emily's List, the national group that supports pro-choice women, decided to come into this race and has made it a race for Chris June Kiliani. We think, obviously, the votes have to be counted. Sisolak had a 6 or 7 to 1 edge in money over Chris June Kiliani. The money that has been spent now is well over $10 million if you include the candidate spending and the outside groups. It may be closer to $15 million by the time we tally it all up. So that is an interesting sidelight. But what's really happened here in this primary is that you have the Democrats essentially, as I've described them, as showing as if they were a dysfunctional family, right, with all kinds of squabbles, but not just between the candidates, who, by the way, sit about as far away from each other as you and I are on a dais as Clark County commissioners. Can you imagine what the meetings are going to be like after this is over? Not to mention the fact, another sidelight is that a couple of her colleagues have taken, Chris June Kiliani's colleagues, have taken very strong stances for Sisolak or against her, Susan Brager, calling her a liar in one of the closing ads. I have to tell you, I'm just slightly older than you, Elizabeth, but I've seen a lot of, I've never seen someone's colleague on a political board come out that late and call the person a liar.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You've been covering politics in this state for nigh on 30, we'll call it 30-something years, so you've seen a lot, done a lot. It seems to me we do have kind of a singular race this year, and you just hit on both the points. Number one, the amount of money that has been spent on this primary. I can't remember a primary in recent history over the past couple cycles where we saw this kind of money being spent. And certainly if Chris G had even more, we probably would have seen close to $20 million spent in this race. And then, yes, just how brutal it's been. I mean, and interesting, fascinating that these two politicians, well known in Southern Nevada for a long, long time, sit on the Clark County Commission, arguably the most powerful government entity in the state in terms of what they control and what they affect in the county in Southern Nevada, which contains 70% of the population of this state, to be going after each other the way they are, to see where they've decided to draw the lines, what they think the winning issues are. And it's going to play interestingly in the general election, I think, because right now there's been this race to, who can get farther to the left of the other. But starting tomorrow, it's a whole new ball game. Whoever comes out of this is going to have to pivot in some way, shape, or form and start thinking about Adam Laxalt, the presumable winner. I'm not calling the race right there, everyone, but that we're presuming that that's how it's going to go. But yeah, it's been brutal, and I can't remember a race anywhere in a primary in recent years in which we've seen this kind of vitriol being tossed around.
I think it's a real problem for the Democrats going into the general elections. Why I think Adam Laxalt is a favorite, excuse me, maybe just a slight favorite to win this race, because the Democrats have just, they've gone after, I mean, Adam Laxalt could just run ads of whoever loses the Democratic primary saying things about whoever wins the Democratic primary, because you can't imagine Laxalt saying much more brutal things about Steve Sisolak or Chris G than they've said about each other. But what is really interesting here is how much is really at stake here in this race, why it's being watched nationally. This is a Republican governor, Brian Sandoval, who's leaving after 2 terms. There has not been a Democratic governor in this state in 20 years. And the Democrats see with the supposed blue wave, which, by the way, I haven't seen a ripple of yet, so let's not call that too early. They think that this is their chance to take back the governorship, which in any state, but especially in Nevada, with one of the strongest executives in the country, is the most important office you can hold. You have so much power, especially here, as I mentioned, Elizabeth, because the legislature only meets 4 months out of 24. The governor has immense power, not just when they're there to veto bills, but when they're not there to do all kinds of things through administrative fiat, through executive orders, and just by appointing people to boards and judges. It is a huge deal, and most people watching this don't think about this every day, but we're not normal. We think about this stuff 24/7. The governor is going to have a huge role in changing the districts after the 2020 election when they do what is called reapportionment and redistricting, when they redraw congressional and legislative districts. This is a very, very big deal, and I really do think that right now all of the Democratic establishment, while they're glued right now to the Indy TV watching us, hanging on our every word, are absolutely petrified, waiting for those first returns to come in. Because here's the bottom line, and a lot of people won't say this out loud, Elizabeth, the Democratic establishment believes Chris Giuliani cannot win a general election. By the way, I don't think that that's true, but I think there's a lot of reason historically to believe that Steve Sisolak, a more middle-of-the-road kind of candidate, could win, and that she, as an unabashed liberal, and she's running as who she is, would have a difficult time winning a general election. I don't think that's necessarily true. This may be a different kind of year. I think Laxalt has a lot of weaknesses, but that's what the Democratic establishment thinks.
Yeah, it's never good when your establishment has an opinion like that. On the other hand, we just saw in the presidential race recently that the establishment is not always right about who the winning candidate can be. But I want to refer back to something you said that I think is really interesting, and it's that Team Laxalt understands very well everything that John just got done saying, because they have already started to talk in general to the public about how it's important that Laxalt be elected into that governor's mansion, because there is going to be a democratically controlled legislature. And we do, I think, out of nearly all the states, and you've referred to this many times in your columns and your writing, that we have a very strong executive government. In other words, our governor has more power to do more, control more, not just through vetoes of bills, but as you said, who he appoints. And so forth. So it does matter, and Laxalt's team will be making that argument in the general election, trying to convince the voters in Nevada that however much they may like Chris G., they do not want her to be governor, because who knows what may happen in Carson City as the session rolls around if we've got Democrats across the board in place, whether that's on taxes or on gun control or on health care or any number of other things.
So we have about 10 minutes before the polls close, and I'm hoping that those numbers will pop up pretty quickly. But maybe we should bring up one of our special guests. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Sure, we can do that. So I'll introduce him while we get him set here up on the dais. So David Damore is a professor here at UNLV. I have the pleasure of being on the air with him every week on Our Metropolis on KUUNV right here at the university, where we talk about the issues that affect Southern Nevada. He's also done tremendous work in recent years on studying the Latino demographic, the issues that are important to them, how they vote, and so we'll be talking about that as well as a couple other things while you're up here with us. David, welcome.
Welcome to the debut of Indy TV. This is a fulfillment of a lifetime dream of yours, is it not, to be here? That's what I thought. Exactly. So give me your general feelings. You've watched a lot of these elections as well. Does anything stick out?
I guess two things stick out to me. The first is just what we're seeing nationally, the abundance of candidates up and down the ballot. I mean, you look at some of these races, there's dozens of candidates who just put their name out there. The second thing is what you guys have been alluding to, and that is, you wrote a book about the anointment process. Well, that seems
called The Anointed One. It's available on Amazon.
So this is sort of unique in the sense is we're seeing particularly on the Democratic side, right? We've seen this in past cycles. The Republicans have been fighting among themselves between the moderates and the Tea Party. Now it seems the action seems to be switching on the Democratic side. The Republicans are more, not necessarily coalesced around Adam Laxalt, but he's clearly the favorite there. So is this just sort of the influence of the Reid machine waning a little bit, or is this just simply something that we're observing now on the Democratic side that we've been seeing the last couple of cycles on the Republican side?
Well, the Reid machine is an interesting thing to talk about because the Reid machine, named for Harry Reid, who dominated Democratic and actually Nevada and to some extent national politics for decades, essentially is all in with Steve Sisolak. And Harry Reid is still active, but people who think he pulls all the strings, he doesn't pull all the strings, but he has people to do that, right? And so he still has a lot of influence. And so this is a test for him. And they've gone all out. They've even gotten Dina Titus, who ran against that establishment in 2006 when she ran for governor. She's endorsed Steve Sisolak. Now, they're old friends, and this is, I think it's much more of a personal than a political endorsement there. But you have Dina Titus and Harry Reid both doing commercials for Steve Sisolak, making him sound like the second coming. And that is really something, that's real spectacle.
It is. And I think your point's well taken in sort of trying to make him acceptable to the base, realizing that really in the general election he's probably the more traditional mold, the moderate, business-friendly candidate of both parties there. So that is very, very interesting. When you go back, of course, you've talked about in your columns a little bit, this 2006 is obviously the comparison case here, where you have the female, in this case Dina Titus, running against Jim Gibson, right? And she runs the grassroots, let's go out and knock on doors. Gibson runs the more media heavy and ends up losing that race now. Now she's on the other side there. Sisolak clearly ran the higher budget, the big media campaigns, and you've seen Chris G. She's been out all over the state knocking doors here. So you have this sort of very, very different dynamic there, similar dynamic, but how it's playing out in what, where we are 12 years later?
I want you to jump in, but can I just give like a fantastic piece of Nevada trivia based on what David just said? When Jim Gibson ran against Dina Titus, there I was in Henderson, when Jim Gibson was the mayor of Henderson, was making his announcement, and who was standing there, and did I meet there, who was running in the shadows, essentially, Jim Gibson's campaign. I bet you guys don't
That's one of Obama's people, right?
This is why he's a professor. David Plouffe. Yeah. David Plouffe, who ended up running Obama's campaign, helped run Gibson's campaign. He did a little bit better with Obama.
Yeah. All paths lead back to Nevada, as
right.
John Ralston loves to say all the time. I want to ask you a question, David. On our weekly program, we talk a lot about the legislature and what may or may not happen. So we were just talking about the difference between a Republican in that office and a Democrat in that office. But it's not just about that, because Sisolak is a different type of Democrat than Chris G. So kind of give us a rundown. I mean, if Laxalt ends up in the governor's mansion, what do you think? And then let's talk about the Democrats.
Well, I think, everybody's gotten sort of comfortable in the Sandoval model there, right? But that's going to be different regardless. First thing to look at is the legislature. I was counting it up last night. I think you're going to end up with 15 new legislators regardless if anybody loses an election.
Right.
You're going to have 7 new senators just to start. So that's a third of the Senate. So you're going to have a bunch of turnover there. So that creates all kinds of tension. Who's going to run the committees and that kind of stuff there. And then obviously you have a new governor who takes office in November, but they inherit Sandoval's budget. They can try to tweak it there. But your point's really, what are going to be the fault lines, right? Where are they going to fight? If it's Chris G, right, it's a very, very different set of dynamics in play. If it's Laxalt, we're going to hear a whole lot about some of the conservative education policies that sort of fell by the wayside, particularly in 17. I think those get resurrected. You're going to probably see a lot. I think Democrats are going to feel motivated to act on guns. And he's certainly not going to be very excited about doing that. So I think that creates all kinds of tensions, what actually ends up being in the give and take. And you're going to end up with people who've never really cut those deals. I think that's another important point. You don't have that sort of experience. You don't have the trust, the personal rapport between the leadership of the parties and whoever inherits the governor's mansion. So it's going to be a big learning curve for everybody here. And say the question 3 ends up passing, how much oxygen is that going to suck up there and push out other issues that I think some other folks would like to deal with?
The polls are about to close in 5 minutes. I just want to ask you one more question before we let you go. But first I want to tell our viewers a little bit of breaking news and give away a secret about television you may not know. Occasionally tonight, Elizabeth and I are going to hear things in our ear from our crack reporters and team in the control room telling us about some of this breaking news. We've just, and I say breaking, this isn't really that much that we didn't know, but it turns out it's now being reported fewer than 10 of these incidents with the ballots. It's not a big deal. AP is reporting this. Washoe County is reporting this too. So please stay off of social media if you don't want to be scared by the conspiracy theorists. I have no doubt that Wayne Allen Root at the RJ has said that ISIS has penetrated the election already. So, but there have only been isolated incidents. I'm going to let you go in just a second for first segment. We've locked you in the room so you can't leave all night. But let's talk about what you really have a lot of expertise in, and not just Latino vote. Is not that big a factor as some people might think in a primary. 80% or so of the turnout is white voters. The Latino vote, I think, is only 8 or 9% or so. It's in the general election, though, where it could be pivotal. Was in 2012, was actually in 2014 for the Democrats because it dropped so much, and then 2016 it picked up again. What are you looking at in 2018?
Well, I think a lot of it plays out, what happens in the national races. I mean, that's going to drive the issues here. And, we saw in 16 our data from Latino Decisions that Trump was a huge motivator for Latino turnout. Not necessarily excited about Hillary Clinton to say, but Trump was the big motivator, and there was a real threat to Trump. Now, if he sort of wanes, I imagine that's going to happen.
But the threat has now become real. It's
no,
not
absolutely,
just a threat,
it's got real,
right?
and the degree that Republicans, Dean Heller and Adam Laxalt, move lockstep with him, that can be provide a motivating factor for Latino turnout here. Now, we saw currently in 14, after the failure of comprehensive immigration reform nationally, that Latino turnout in disinterest in politics just shot up. And Trump sort of motivated that in 16. So you've certainly seen, and this is one of the other dynamics I think is interesting, is, you look at Dean Heller, 16 race, no Trump. Now, was it last week? I won't vote anything that he won't support on immigration there.
DACA, right.
And so that's, I think, an interesting change is how the party, that sort of moderate Sandoval wing, is sort of disappeared here, and they're all sort of, at least at this point in time in the primary, cozying up to sort of the Trump world here. And does that spill over? And what are the implications for that? And he's talking about coming here. You're going to see the outside groups here. It's going to be wild.
We got 2 minutes to 7 o'clock. Do I have time for one more question?
Of course you do.
Okay, so let's flip the question and talk about a Democrat in the legislature from a Republican standpoint, or I mean, how bad could it be? Will we be California by the end of next year, as some predict, if the Democrats?
What I think is interesting is both Sisolak and Giuliani have not talked about raising taxes, which I think that's being strategic at this point, or if they really feel that there's enough money in the budget, if the economy's picking up enough that the tax revenue will be enough
strategic.
Yeah, you think a little bit.
I hate to be a spoilsport.
Yeah, exactly on that one there. So they talked about more money for education, so on and so forth. It looks like there'll be more money in the budget, but is it going to be enough to sort of fulfill some of those Democratic?
Just a story that the Tesla tax credits wiped out whatever surplus they were going to have. So and you can be sure that Adam Laxalt's going to be talking a lot about how they'll raise taxes during even though his plan theoretically could cost more.
And I have to point this out. I'm kind of a stickler for the facts, especially when it comes to dollars and cents. So, Sisolak in particular, but June Giuliani also have talked about that funding formula and how it's time to fix that and get it right and make sure that Washoe and Clark students are getting their fair share of the money without taking money from the rurals. This is kind of the key. And everybody wants to do it without raising taxes. But the Indy's written a number of very in-depth stories on this topic. In our assessment, it's going to take no less than $1 billion additional dollars to properly redo that funding formula and make it fair and square for students across the state. So for anyone to be talking about redoing the funding formula and not raising taxes at the same time, it's cognitive dissonance.
I don't think anyone thinks there's going to be $1 billion done in one session. I think Sisolak has had to address that and said not. But listen, they're going to have a hard time getting, I think all the candidates, whether Republican or Democrat, running for the legislature, running for governor, a hard time around saying, oh, everything's rosy with the budget, don't worry, we can keep all the, because there are so-called, roll-up costs, and more students, more folks on Medicaid. It's just, there's not going to be a lot of money lying around.
No,
all right, David Damore, thanks for coming on, joining us for your insights. Stick around if you can.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you a little bit later. And it is the witching hour, so to speak.
Wow.
It's 7 o'clock.
What a way to put it.
It is 7 o'clock, and the polls have closed across Nevada. We are going to start bringing you results as soon as we can. Here on Indy TV from the beautiful campus and inside the studio with this great team that we have. Elizabeth and I hope to be doing a lot more Indy TV, right, Elizabeth?
We certainly do. We've got all kinds of things planned coming up, especially if this goes well tonight and we have more than 3 viewers. I know you hate it when I say things like that. But yeah, we want to start covering events from time to time. We definitely are going to do a big general election night later this year. We've already done some Indy TV quasi events. I mean, we didn't call it Indy TV at the time, but our Indy Talks events in which you've interviewed elected officials, including Governor Sandoval, Reno Mayor Hillary Sheevy. We had pollster Mark Mellman come in and break down the statewide poll that he did for us. All of that we recorded in partnership with UNLV TV, and all of that's available on Indy TV. Now, if you want to go back and watch any of those videos at any time, you can do so. The great interviews, some great stuff came out of all of those. Most recently, we had the Congressional 3 and Congressional 4 debate. One of those we did right here on campus. Another one happened in our partnership with Channel 13. So those are available as well. So we'll be producing more and more television and video content for our viewers. So from time to time, check that Indy TV page and let us know what you want to see and who you want to hear from and who you'd like John to interview, or if you want to see us do a roundtable or a panel. We did a great event called State of Pot on the state of marijuana policy federally and in Nevada, what we expect to see coming up, a little bit of speculation on what we can expect to see out of the Trump administration and how that might affect recreational marijuana industry here in Nevada. So open to your ideas. Hope you'll watch. Glad you're tuning in tonight. We're excited to be here doing wall-to-wall live elections coverage, which is a luxury that many TV stations do not have, and we do.
And we hope that you will be entertained and informed tonight, and will forgive us any mistakes that occur in our virgin effort here on Indy TV, because they will all be Elizabeth's fault, and you can address
sure.
all of your complaints to her
absolutely
later on. Let me just tell people, Elizabeth, it looks like, and these numbers are going to be pretty close to final. It looks like close to 84,000 people turned out in Clark County, which means turnout came close to 9%, which is 50% higher than it was on Election Day in the past 3 cycles. So the numbers are going to be up. It's not going to be 19% statewide. It's probably going to be up closer to 25% or somewhere in the middle there. What does that mean? It's still very low turnout, right? And so it's hard to tell. But 84,000 people, I think, is a little bit higher for Election Day than people expected. Usually the turnout is as low as 6% or so, because so many people vote here early. We're hoping to have the first numbers before 8 o'clock. We can't say for sure, because as I mentioned earlier, they can't report, even though they're all there ready. They just have to plug them in and report until all of the counties report to the Secretary of State that their numbers are in. So we may have to wait for a while.
We may, and I'm actually glad we have a little bit of time because the student team here at UNLV went out into the field and did a little bit of work and put together a couple of what we call story packages on the U.S. Senate race, both on the Republican and the Democratic side, kind of giving a rundown of what's been happening in those races and who the candidates are. So I'd like our viewers to take a look at that. Let's take a look at the Republican side first, which is kind of an all Dean Heller all the time story, but there were a couple other candidates in the mix there. So let's take a look at that.
The embattled Republican Senator Dean Heller is facing off stiff competition from both the left and right for his Senate seat. Dean Heller's Senate seat is up for grabs this year. The Republican senator has held onto the seat since 2012 and is facing off with 4 other candidates vying for the Republican nomination. Heller's Republican opponents have not been able to grab the same amount of attention nor raise the same competitive funds for their campaigns. The Republican candidates for Senate against Heller, who is the incumbent, is a stance. Sherry Brooks, a returning 2012 candidate for Senate, Sarah Ghazala, a special education teacher and return candidate, Vic Harrell, a self-titled citizen statesman running for the first time, and Tom Heck, an Air Force veteran and return candidate. According to the Nevada Independent, Dean Heller's fundraising period ended at $4.9 million. Arguably, Heller's the most well-funded Republican candidate in Nevada. The real candidate matching those competitive standards is the presumptive Democratic nominee for the Senate seat, Congresswoman Jackie Rosen. Jackie Rosen is running against 5 other candidates in the Democratic Party. Jesse Sabah, a Henderson-based attorney and former candidate for Nevada's 3rd Congressional District, Danny Burley, a first-time candidate for the seat, David Drew Knight, a UNR graduate and Reno native, Sujit Bobby Mahendra, a return 2016 Senate candidate, and Alan Reinhart, a return 2016 candidate, as well as former candidate for governor of Nevada. According to a Nevada Independent poll for the U.S. Senate race, Heller beat Rosen by 1%. Currently, this election is competing within the margin of error.
So my favorite thing about this campaign was the day that Donald Trump tweeted out how great it would be if Danny Tarkanian would see his way out of the U.S. Senate primary against incumbent Dean Heller and perhaps run in some other race. Oh, let's see, maybe CD3, which he almost immediately did. I think he took a day or two to discuss it with his family before he made that call, but finally decided that as a good Republican, when the president calls upon you to do such a thing, then you do it. And out he went, and Dean Heller all of a sudden found himself with a pretty wide open field, and we expect him tonight, despite the worthy efforts of these other candidates challenging him. Of course, when you have as much money in your campaign coffers as Dean Heller, and you've got the name recognition, and you've been in politics in a state for so long, it definitely gives you a big name recognition advantage. So he'll sail right through tonight.
I hate to correct you on air, Elizabeth, but
I think you enjoy it.
I object to your use of the word other worthy candidates in that primary against Dean Heller. There are at least 2 cranks who have run all the time.
Well, that's because I'm a nicer person than John, as everyone already knows.
That's a very low bar to get over, though, of course. But listen, Dean Heller got a gift from the president, and they wanted it, they needed it, they pushed for it. Some of his campaign people still are boasting, oh, we would have beaten Tarkanian. I am not so sure of that. I'm pretty sure that Danny Tarkanian would have come very close or defeated Dean Heller. In fact, I predicted he would defeat Dean Heller, and so that prediction was taken off of my plate, so that's one fewer prediction to get wrong this year. But listen, I think it's going to be interesting to watch, because as much as those are a bunch of unknowns there, Elizabeth, running against Dean Heller, and he should win easily, there were some rumblings from some people in the Republican Party that the base was still going to go out and vote for some of these other candidates just to send a message to Dean Heller that they're not happy with the way he acted toward the president, or they're not happy with being for repealing Obamacare before being against repealing Obamacare before being for it again. And will the base send a message to Dean Heller? I think it'll be very good for him if he gets a very large percentage to say, look, none of that is true. I am strong with the base. Now I'm just going to go out and try to get independent voters. Suddenly he won't be as loving toward Donald Trump. I would guess, and I would also guess that they are going to start now really going after Jackie Rosen, who is going to win that Democratic primary and is relatively unknown. Even our poll that we did a couple months ago showed that she was only known by, say, I think it was 15% of the voters in the state. That's fertile territory for Dean Heller. They've tried some stupid stuff already on Twitter and with Victor Jakes at the RJ, but that stuff has not stuck and won't stick. They're going to go after Jackie Rosen. They don't have that much material, but tying her to Nancy Pelosi, tying her to Harry Reid, and cherry-picking votes, which is how you win federal races. You cherry pick votes. Jackie Rosen's going to do the same thing to Dean Heller. There's just a lot more votes that Dean Heller has cast.
I'm going to thank you for that smooth, unintentional segue, because our UNLV
it was unintentional, I admit
student team also put together a nice little story package on the Democratic side of the race, which is sort of being headlined by Jackie Rosen because she's the anointed candidate on that side of the aisle. But there are some other candidates, and you can get a chance to take a look at them right now.
Question 3 is summing up to be a contentious topic, from splitting up energy monopolies to what role home-generated power plays. Locals are wondering if they have enough energy to split up Nevada energy. According to a recent article from the Nevada Independent, Station Casinos are the latest company to leave NV Energy, Fulcrum Sierra Biofuels being one of the more recent companies to leave. The two companies join many businesses that are seeking energy alternatives when it comes to who their providers are. Question 3 on the ballot has generated interest to stray away from the single energy provider in the Valley, NV Energy. The initiative gives residents the choice to split up the power provider into several alternatives or keep things the same. Currently, 75% of the state's energy comes from natural gas, with an additional amount being filled in with solar and geothermal energy. Renewable resources are becoming more and more self-serving and are giving residents the ability to be, for the first time, energy independent. Though these initiatives will be decided in the general election, they have become major talking points for candidates for this primary. For some, the initiative has become whether the powerful have become too powerful.
I'm going to give a shout out to Patrick Donnelly right now because he hoped on Twitter earlier today that there would be a snafu or two tonight, and we just had our first one. Because I told you we were tossing to video on the Democratic primary in the U.S. Senate race. And instead, what we saw was a package on question 3, which has been a big issue in the Democratic primary for governor. And even Governor Sandoval recently kind of backing off his position there. It'll be a huge issue in the general election. David Dormer mentioned that when he was on the air with us just a few minutes ago. We may talk more about that now, later, I don't know, but we'll be talking about it all the way till November either way because it's going to be on your ballot.
I will say that, excuse me, that the sports books had it at 45-1 against us having a flawless performance tonight, and so we got that bet settled very early on, so people can collect their money. And listen, we're going to make mistakes tonight, folks, and we hope that we're still going to be giving you the best results and analysis, and we're going to call races. Nobody else is doing what we're doing tonight. Most of the TV stations won't even be on the air for several hours. We're going to be on the air for a long time, and we're going to try to make it replete with the results and the races you care about. We're focusing, of course, on that governor's race because it's the one with the most impact, but we're going to bring you the congressional primaries, the one that you mentioned earlier with Danny Tarkanian being the favorite in the Republican side to face Susie Lee, and then that very crowded 5-candidate primary for the Democratic primary to replace Ruben Kihuen, who is not running again because of multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. So that we're following that. We're following all of the other races down ballot. We have our reporters checking for the results, and they know better than anybody in this state what to look for. And so we're going to have those. The district attorney's race in Clark County will be decided tonight. We'll know a lot once those first numbers pop up. There are a couple of legislative races, I believe, that are going to be decided tonight. That there's a Supreme Court race that's going to be very, very contentious in the general election between a sitting Clark County judge and one on the newly created Court of Appeals here. We're going to give you those results too. And again, please tweet at us if you have questions. We have people watching for those tweets who will speak into our ears, and mysteriously you will have no idea that they have done so. And that hashtag is NVIndyTV.
Speaking of which, NVIndyTV, hashtag on Twitter, or you can drop questions on Facebook too. Now, Natalie's in the control room, and she's watching the Facebook comments, so you can drop your comments and questions there. We do have a little bit of information, which is kind of interesting to me, about the voting centers. So many of you may be aware that you couldn't vote where you voted last year because voting centers got set up across Clark County in which no matter what precinct you live in, you could show up at one of these voting centers and cast your ballot. There's no such thing anymore as showing up at the wrong place to vote. If you're registered and your signature matches, you can vote there. So what we're hearing on Twitter and also from our own reporters who are kind of following what's going on social media around the county is that it looks like the most popular places to vote were the voting centers that were placed at libraries and shopping centers. The schools, not so much. So many of us we're used to voting at schools. That's where I always vote, is the closest local high school or elementary school,
right?
Wherever. But those are dipping in popularity, I guess, as voting centers. So shopping centers, libraries. Reporter Riley Snyder said that Centennial Center today had just over 2,000 voters, which was the most, and Sunset Galleria Mall had the second most at just under 2,000. So those two locations pulling in the most voters today.
I want to tell everybody, too, it looks like I'm looking at the Secretary of State's website, and I want to tell everybody that, yes, Elizabeth and I have laptops in front of us. Yes, we've been on our laptops. It may not be the most polite thing to do on television, but we're trying to get the information for you to give you the results. That's why you tuned in for the results and for the witty repartee and analysis, right? In that order, I think, Elizabeth.
Absolutely.
And so it looks like there's going to probably be about 300,000 voters or so that turned out in this election, Elizabeth, from what I can tell. The last update for the Secretary of State was 6 o'clock. That's up there now, and there were 286,000 or so ballots cast. So I think we'll get up to about 300,000 or so ballots cast total. And, you know, that sounds like a lot, but I remind everybody there's about 1.5 million voters, registered active voters. We tell people we go off of active voters, meaning voters who participate in elections, not who have been declared inactive. They're still on the rolls, but they haven't voted in an election or two. And of course, that's become controversial too. They eventually get knocked off. And there was a case just this week that some of you may have heard about in Ohio, where that process that is, in my opinion, inaccurately called a purge was held up. But those voters getting knocked off is a lot of the reason why the Democrats have lost some of their lead that they've had in Nevada for a long time. They still have a 60,000 plus lead, but used to be a lot bigger, but they've lost a lot of voters to these so-called purges that are really just knocking off voters who haven't participated in a while. All the trivia that you want, Elizabeth, right here on Indy TV.
It's one of my favorite things about you is that you've been doing this for so long, and you obsess.
So long.
So long.
But
you obsess over the numbers, and you've got all kinds of spreadsheets with the different years and tabs of presidential years and non-presidential years, and a lot of this you just know off the.
I feel like this is a therapy session.
Head.
Are you saying I need to get a life, Elizabeth?
No, not at all.
Okay,
what would we do without you? So turnout 25%. How does that compare to the biggest turnout that we've seen lately? What was the last time that we saw a huge turnout in a midterm?
Well, I mean, huge turnout, as I said, in 2010 was 30%. And that was because Harry Reid was running for re-election, and he faced a Republican candidate by the name of Sharon Angle that everyone may remember. That was quite the race. But Sharon Angle wasn't expected to win that primary. It was a multi-way primary that included Sue Loudon, the former state Republican Party chairwoman, who was on TV for a long time, a very beloved personality, and Danny Tarkanian. You ever hear of him? He was in that primary, as well as other folks, and that juiced the turnout in that primary. I thought the governor's race this time between those two Democrats would do the same. It's not going to quite get to 30%. I'm not sure it'll get quite to 25%, but pretty close. If it's 300,000 voters or so, which is what I think it's going to be, that's just under 25%. But I think it'll be pretty close, and so it'll be the biggest turnout since 2010. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been 19% the last three election cycles, remarkably consistent. It's a little up this time, but you mentioned this earlier, Elizabeth. There hasn't been a race like this in a primary in a long time in Nevada.
Yeah, and interesting. I love Nevada politics for so many reasons, and one is that every cycle before we really get ramped up, I start to think, oh, you know what? It's not going to be a good year for us. We're not going to have an interesting race. We're not going to have a marquee race. What are we going to talk about? We're going to have to make things up, or focus on the minor issues, or really drill down on the local races. But here we are again with a huge and interesting Democratic primary on the Democratic side. I wish we had a knockdown drag out on the Republican side. I'm actually a big believer in having a serious primary race because it really forces the candidates to take a stand. and they get vetted kind of through the criticisms of the other candidate, and they have to defend themselves, and you get to kind of see what they're made of and what do they think their winning issues are, where do they choose to draw those lines. Of course, it's easier to hold someone accountable in a general election if they've gone on the record during a primary and said some things. So Adam Laxalt has an advantage, in my view, in that gubernatorial race because he's been able to sort of get away with not having to take as many solid stands on as many issues, only because he doesn't have anyone serious challenging him. Sorry, Dan Schwartz, if I'm proven wrong tonight and you pull this off.
The miracle occurs?
I'll be the first to apologize and send you flowers. But, Dan Schwartz, an underdog in the race, again, because of name recognition, but so great in Nevada that we've got that Democratic primary, but also in both Congressional District 3 and Congressional District 4, where we've got Stephen Horsford trying to retake the seat that he first owned, right, when that congressional district was formed just not that many cycles ago. But some other serious Democrats in that race who really would like a shot at it as well.
We're going to know a lot about that race. That race is not entirely, that district is not entirely in Clark County. About 85% or so of the vote is, depending on what the turnout is in the rural part of it. It's got 6 other counties or so. It stretches all the way up to northern Nevada. It's a very odd district. It's why the Republicans were able to take it in that big upset in 2014 when Crescent Hardy beat Stephen Horsford. Then Reuben Kewin came back during a presidential year when turnout is much higher and was able to use the urban core of North Las Vegas to win the seat back from then Congressman Hardy, who again is running this year to try to take back his old seat. And maybe against Stephen Horsford, although that is a 5-way primary. Horsford has had by far the most money, the endorsement of the Culinary Union. He seems to be the favorite there, but it's a primary. It's a strange year. There have been some very spirited campaigns by Amy Villela, calling herself Amy for the People, an activist for Medicare for All. State Senator Pat Spearman, who got a late endorsement from, wait for it, Patricia Arquette. I still don't know what Patricia Arquette does for somebody. I mean, I think she's a very good actress, but what she does for somebody in a Nevada primary on the last day, I don't know. But I've got to say, Pat Spearman got Patricia Arquette. Maybe because it was 2 Pats. I don't know.
Maybe this morning, you just reminded me. I had almost forgotten that so many things have happened today. And as we were working on our stories for tonight and tomorrow, President Donald Trump this morning, not exactly early, not as the polls were opening. I think it was mid-morning. Correct me on the timing of this, or maybe one of the reporters can shoot me a message and let me know. Or maybe, Natalie, if you get a chance, if you can grab a screenshot of that tweet by Donald Trump enthusiastically endorsing Adam Laxalt for governor, talking about what a great governor and leader he thinks Laxalt would be. He mentioned specifically his trust in Laxalt to keep taxes low. Of course, this has been one of Trump's rallying points, and actually one of the issues on which he's got the highest voter approval across the board, because everybody likes low taxes, especially when it benefits their pocketbook. But I found it interesting and a little confusing that this happened today. Early voting was going on for a few weeks. I know you don't, not a fan of early voting, but there it is, and lots of people voted in early voting. So why now? Why? Let's get the tweet up on the air if we have. There we go. I strongly endorse Adam Laxalt for governor of Nevada. Adam is smart, works hard, and knows how to win. He'll be a great governor. Also will fight hard to lower your taxes and is tough on crime. Why today?
Well, I think it's very strange timing, as you pointed out. It's also, as our story pointed out, we have a story up on the NevadaIndependent.com. How many times can I say the URL tonight?
Keep saying it.
Keep saying
as
it.
many times as you wish.
.com. Our Michelle Rendell's did it.
Indy.com gets you there as well.
And I think Riley Snyder, they got a double byline on that piece, because Riley never lets a chance to get a double byline pass, I think. So he took that with Michelle. But seriously, they pointed out in that story that he's great about lowering taxes. There's no evidence at all that Adam Laxalt's going to try to lower taxes. His education plan and some of his school safety stuff looks like it was going to cost a lot more money, and he wants to get rid of the commerce tax, which brings $400 million in. But having said that, let's get back to Donald Trump.
You just contradicted yourself. Yeah. So he has talked about lowering taxes. He's talked about getting rid of the commerce tax, which affects businesses in this state who bring in a certain amount of revenue.
That is fair, but he's also said he's going to keep education funding at the current level. So this is a good semantic argument. If he cuts the commerce tax, which by the way is never going to happen, but if he were to cut the commerce tax, but then had to fund his own plan by raising some other kind of tax, is he lowering taxes?
Revenue neutral is the term that gets tossed around in times like this. Is that we sort of, the not nice way to say it is that you rob Peter to pay Paul in the budget. You cut over here and shuffle it over there. You pull a little from the rainy day fund, which actually does have a little bit of money in it now, thanks to the recreational marijuana tax that just got added. And at the end of the legislature, there wasn't time to put it where it needed to go.
So do you think
slammed it into that fund temporarily?
I want to get back to the Trump thing in a second, but do you think that Adam Laxalt is going to run his campaign then? As the president apparently advised him, I'm going to lower taxes on businesses that make more than $4 million a year. You think that's a winning general election strategy?
I don't think the slogan will go quite like that.
Not quite like that? No.
But, committed to keeping your, taxes low and your neighborhoods safe. I'm riffing off of Donald Trump's tweet. Now, that could be.
So let's talk about Trump and why he would have done this now, why Adam Laxalt would have wanted him to do this now. There was absolutely zero evidence that Donald Trump is going to be anything but an albatross for Republicans in this cycle. How much of an albatross? Very difficult to say. His numbers have gone up recently, and since he apparently got North Korea to denuclearize this week, even though that's not in the document, but it's understood that it's going to happen, maybe his numbers are going to go up, and maybe he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and maybe Adam Laxalt will go over to Sweden to help him accept it. I don't know. But I guess what I'm wondering about this is what's the calculus here? Why tie? Adam Laxalt's also been fairly clever about not talking about Trump. He's good about not talking about things, but especially Trump. He has not mentioned Trump as much as some of the other candidates like Danny Tarkanian. What's the old Rudy Giuliani thing, the noun verb 9/11? Danny Tarkanian is noun verb Donald Trump. And so I guess I'm wondering why they think it's a good idea now to tether himself to Trump. Now he can't get away from it. And Adam Laxalt put out a tweet thanking the president, and we're not going to let Nevada turn into California, which I think, Adam Laxalt and Donald Trump are the two most prominent politicians who hate California. Adam Laxalt because he wants to imply that we're going to turn into this high tax, high regulated place, and Donald Trump because, he would have won California if all those undocumented folks hadn't voted for Hillary Clinton there, right?
I'm really glad you brought this up because you and I agree all the time, but on this particular issue of whether it is smart to talk about not becoming California or not in a campaign, I actually think Adam Laxalt might be onto something, especially in the rurals, but not just in the rurals, because up in Washoe County, where there have been a large percentage of people who have moved from California into the Bay Area. They've started voting. They vote more liberally. They vote Democratic. We've seen the voter rolls shift up there in the last 10 to 15 years. And you look at California, not saying we're going to be California in the next couple years, but if you're a sensible person and you think about it and you look at, what happens when you keep raising taxes to fund whatever it may be, welfare programs, the schools, environmental protection. We need more of this. We need more of that. We've got to step up law enforcement. The list goes on and on. There's an endless number of places to spend money, and California has, including on its state pension system, which is on the verge of bankrupting the state budget. This is true. This is a fact. You can't get away from it. So I'm not sure that you're right about that, how that plays with voters. Maybe not with liberals, but maybe with the independents and the nonpartisans. And in Nevada, where nearly 20% of our voters now are nonpartisan or consider themselves independent, that's a pretty big voter block to be going after. So I'm not, you make fun of that as if there's no sense to it at all. I think there is.
Well, Welcome to the Crossfire segment of Indy TV tonight. And while I will not do the old Saturday Night Live, Jane, never mind.
Don't you dare.
I guess what I'd say about a couple of things in response there. Number one, I've never said that it doesn't appeal to anyone. I don't believe that.
You scoff at it, though.
I scoff at it because I think it's ridiculous. It has nothing. He makes it sound, and in one breath he says how great the economy's going, and then the other says, oh no, we're going to turn into California.
Well, if we spend all our money and more than we have.
But that there's no evidence that is happening.
Well,
but
let me just get to the political. Governor's mansion, then maybe there will. And isn't that his point?
That's a different argument, and that's an argument that may appeal to independents. Is that if you don't want the Democrats to go so far left and start doing all kinds of crazy stuff, then you need me to stop them. That is a smart thing that could appeal to independent voters if it's done right. But I also think, and let's just talk in terms of politics now, I think it's a smart thing to do to drive up rural turnout. That's how Adam Laxalt became Attorney General. He's the first candidate in modern Nevada history to win an important statewide race and lose both of the urban counties. He lost Washoe and Clark, but won by such landslide margins in rural Nevada. He's beloved out there, and I think that's going to be a big deal for him to keep saying that there. It's not a reality here in Nevada. We're not a high-tax state. We don't have an income tax. Our property taxes are ridiculously low, even though people don't necessarily think that. Yes, we have a high sales tax. No one's talking about raising sales taxes any more than they are, except people who think that maybe a sales tax on services is a good idea. So my only point in that is that, number one, it's smart to try to drive up rural turnout. Number two, it's such an embarrassing shibboleth that is an entree to only a certain kind of voter. I do think the other point you brought up, which he started to say now, that he's a bulwark against the Democratic legislature. It's going to be a Democratic legislature. If you don't want them to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Unfortunately, I think he's bringing in this nonsense about the sanctuary cities and sanctuary state, which are not even real terms, to try to, again, drive up the rural and white vote. I don't like that, but I do think it's good strategically for rural Nevada, which could end up deciding this election.
Yeah, the turnout in the rurals was big for him and still can be big. And it's another thing, speaking of things I love about Nevada, that push-pull between our two big urban counties, but the fact that the rural voters still can influence elections on a statewide basis to such a degree that it actually does behoove candidates, Republicans and Democrats alike, to make these campaign tours of the 15 other counties, to go to ladies' luncheons and Republican dinners, and to show up at little town parades and county fairs and so on and so forth, as they do throughout the campaign season. That's just they're not out there just glad handing. They're out there shaking hands with the people who could show up in November and push them across the finish line and kind of thwart what the blue voters want in Clark and Washoe. We've seen it time and time again. As you pointed out, that's exactly how Laxalt ended up in his seat, and that's not the first time that's happened. So it's fascinating, it's interesting, and it forces candidates to talk to a wide swath of voters all across all the counties about all kinds of issues each election cycle, and I love it. I think it's good for the civic fabric.
I don't disagree with any of that. I guess what I'm wondering about is where that all leads. In other words, what's the natural conclusion of that? I'm not sure where you're going. You're going to have to lead me a little more.
No,
I mean, I guess I'm wondering. I understand that this is all good for the civic fabric, and that argument that you're making. I'm all about the civic fabric. Let's knit it together more tightly. Let me see how far I can go with this. Never mind.
You better stop.
I better stop right now. But listen, I do think that the civic fabric has been very frayed in this state by the primary that we're talking about tonight. And I think that the Democrats have done not just themselves a disservice, but and their chances to win a general election, but they've really insulted the voters by Chris Giuliani making Steve Sisolak seem like he wants to build houses right inside Red Rock, and that he's a gun nut because he once got an A- from the NRA, and Sisolak attacking Chris Giuliani, making it seem like she became a multimillionaire by paying her husband some money during a campaign, and they used this vote. They totally distorted, and I would go so far as to demagogue the vote on a lobbying regulation bill to make it seem like she wanted to relax strictures on lobbyists. I mean, listen, you and I both been around long enough, I'm much longer than you, not to be upset, so to speak, about negative campaigning. But this primary has been completely bereft of issues, really. Now, that's more true in a primary because they generally feel the same way, but they've tried to create issues out of whole cloth that just shouldn't have been issues.
Should we bring Riley Snyder on the set to talk about any of his fact checks? Because Riley has done an amazing job of fact checking the Nevada television ads, both Sisolak's and June Kiliani's, more of Sisolak's because he's had more money to run ads against Chris G. Riley has spent hours upon hours talking to the candidates themselves, as well as looking at where they stand on the record on these issues. The fact checks are one of my favorite part of the website, so I'll do a John Ralston here and plug it. You can search for the fact checks on the website. They're not always just by Riley Snyder, but he loves to do them. He's very good at them. He really digs in. Sometimes he spends days and days and days on just a single fact check. And the point I'm getting at here is that we want to make sure that we help the voters cut through the smoke and mirrors in these television ads, as John was just talking about, get down to the nitty gritty and say, okay, is this attack really true? Is it sort of true? Where is it not true? And is there context? And what other things should we look at? To run their campaigns over the years. So Riley did some checking on that as well. And so I think if we have some time, and we may need to break to deliver numbers, we're hoping we're going to have some numbers to report soon. But let's talk about a few of these with Riley, and then we'll interrupt ourselves if we need to report the numbers to you in real time.
Hi, Riley.
Hey, John.
You look very short tonight. I wonder why that is.
I'm slouching to make you feel
okay. Thank you very much, because my ego is very helpful. There are some numbers to report. We're not sure how they're getting these numbers because of the law, but the New York Times and Politico are reporting some early numbers in the governor's race just from rural Nevada, and I'm going to say what Politico has up, Elizabeth, just so people know. They have Sisolak with 551 votes and Chris G with 362. That's 50 to 33. The only reason that that's interesting at all, if those numbers are accurate, and I don't know where they're getting. We have those up there now. You can see them. Is that Chris G was expected to do very well against Sisolak outside of Clark County. That can't be a good sign for her. Again, I'm not sure where they're pulling those numbers from, but let's go down to the Republican numbers, which look a little bit ominous for Dan Schwartz, to put it mildly. Adam Laxalt squeaking by 81-7. Right there in rural Nevada. As I said, he is going to do very, very well in rural Nevada. Now, again, the Secretary of State here, I believe, I have my reporters checking this, have not reported any results yet. They're not supposed to report results anywhere until all the counties have reported in to the Secretary of State, but I assume that those numbers are real, Elizabeth. So let's bring Riley back now. Riley, well, let's talk about fact checks for a second. Elizabeth brought these up. When you and I first worked together at Channel 13, you were doing them there for a group called PolitiFact, and you bring a kind of people need to see these. I think you do the best fact checks in the country. Give people a little bit of insight on how you approach these fact checks.
Sure, John. So I've been doing fact checks for about 1.5 to 2 years now. There's a process PolitiFact has, and we've sort of copied that over for the Nevada Independent, where You reach out to both sides. It's very important for us not to just run a statement from campaign X and a statement from campaign Y and just sort of put them together, but to actually dig down into what the issue is. This campaign season, and especially the primary between June Giuliani and Steve Sisolak, has been really interesting because none of their ads have been outright false or outright true. We've often just internally complained we wish there was like a Z-axis about the level of spin that goes into these ads, because a lot of them are technically true. You could say Steve Sisolak voted for the developer, but there's a ton of context that needs to go into that you can't explain in 30 seconds, and perhaps June Giuliani's campaign doesn't want to explain in 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for explaining the process. So which one do we want to talk about? Why don't you decide which one do you want to talk about first? Let's talk about one of your fact checks.
Sure. So the most recent one I did was on payments that June Giuliani made to her husband, Gary Gray, who passed away several years ago, but for a long time was a very prominent political consultant in the state for Democratic candidates. The Steve Sisolak campaign seized on a story that the Reno Gazette-Journal did about her paying him a significant sum of money to run her 2006 Clark County Commission race, where she ran against an incumbent Democrat and was able to narrowly win in that primary. They pointed out that she had given more than $1 million over the course of about a decade and a half to her husband's firm, and they raised questions because there's nothing in Nevada law that prevented that. And so for this fact check, I went in, I checked the law, obviously, and for what he was doing and for what services he was providing, there was no law broken. The June Giuliani campaign, because they were obviously very peeved about this attack, provided all the invoices from her 2006 campaign, and in total he made about like $56,000. I think I have the number right.
When you say he, you mean him?
Gary Gray
personally.
himself, while his firm was paid something like $500,000, but all of that went to advertising, paying for volunteers, paying for website registrations, things like that. So there was a significant amount of context. I think that ad got a almost Abe rating on our Abe rating scale, just because they sort of stuck to the RGJ story, which was pretty
Who's Abe, Riley? Tell everybody who Abe is.
Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president. No, let's not get into that.
And he's significant here because?
He was the president when Nevada became a state in the Union.
See,
we decided
Riley knows it.
He does.
This guy's only 16 years old, and he gets all this stuff.
Aced 8th grade history this year.
That's
which
right,
I'm
exactly.
Really
Very
about.
good. Well done.
So we'll just explain to the viewers. Look, if you haven't looked at our Honest Abe scale, it's actually one of my favorite things that we've ever come up with creatively, because the high end of the rating, which has anyone ever gotten an Honest as Abe yet? Riley?
Maybe one, but I don't.
Maybe one. Doesn't happen often. An Honest as Abe is the high end of the scale. That means you told the truth. Honest as Abe.
Abe would be happy.
Abe would be happy with you. He'd approve. The other end of the scale is what we call all hat, no Abe. That means it's complete BS. I think I'm allowed to say BS, right? And then we've got a couple of ratings in between, which is hardly Abe and almost Abe. But Riley's right, and I want to point this out. There's so much context that comes into play, and so there we go. There it is. Great. Right on the screen. There's our scale between false and true. That verdict that you're seeing there is what an almost Abe looks like, closer to true than false. That's the rating that Riley gave on the ad we're talking about. But as you just described, lots and lots of context. The Sisolak ad makes it sound like she committed some kind of high crime by paying her husband's consulting firm some money to help her win races, when in fact, as you pointed out, well, that's not against the law. If you have a family member who's got the talent and the willingness, you can pay a family member to work for your campaign, and you broke it down by collecting invoices, I think, from Chris G, to kind of take a look at, well, how much money really was it. So this is just an example, folks, not just to pat ourselves on the back, but the work we're doing for you to let you be able to cut through, as I said before, the smoke and mirrors, kind of figure out what really is true, and then you decide whether it bothers you that she did this, even though it was legal, or is it just no big deal, and maybe you ding Steve Sisolak a little bit because you don't approve of the criticism. So thanks. That was good job, Riley. You're just as good as explaining these things on TV as you are in your stories.
Anything interesting on Twitter tonight before you leave?
No, nothing interesting on Twitter.
It's been very quiet, hasn't it? It's been very quiet. All right, Riley, go back in there and find something interesting for us.
Will do, John.
All right, thanks for being on here. All right, Elizabeth, the Secretary of State here does not have any idea where the New York Times and Politico are getting their numbers from, but it'll probably, my guess is Lyon County released theirs early to some kind of national AP feed. They probably subscribed to the AP feed, and that's where they got it. My guess is that they probably weren't supposed to do that until the other counties had reported in, but maybe this will speed it up now if it breaks through. The log jam, that would be a good thing for everybody. I just want to let everyone know again that it shows Steve Sisolak with a lead over Chris Giuliani in Lyon County of about 180 votes or so, which is significant in a small rural county. And Adam Laxalt is absolutely destroying the field in Lyon County as well.
And speaking of the different counties, and since we are still waiting for numbers, if it's, oh, wait, I'm going to say this first, and then I'm going to go back to what I was going to say a second ago. I'm so happy with the way this is going, by the way, because we talked about how we really wanted to report in real time. We weren't going to be worried about whether we interrupted ourselves in the middle of a topic to report some numbers, because we know that those of you who are watching us tonight care about the numbers, you care about the returns. Yes, we can talk about these other issues in between, but it's really all about the numbers tonight. We've been eagerly awaiting all these months. So I'm going to get back to my point in a second. But there's been a 15% jump over 2014 in the turnout in Washoe County. That's per the registrar.
Who's reporting that? Our friend Ben up north?
Michelle Rindell's tweeted it by Benjamin. Is it Marjo?
There's Ben. He's a great reporter. That seems like that number cannot be right to me. I don't understand how there can be that many votes in Washoe County, but I suppose it's possible, Elizabeth. Let me just check what the Secretary of State.
Okay, we're going to double check that.
That number cannot be right.
We hate to correct a reporter on the air,
I think he's maybe he's talking about early and. Yeah, he must be talking about early and election.
Total
votes. I think that could be right.
Votes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Total votes.
So just to explain, folks, for those of you who don't geek out on this quite as much as we do, which
means you're normal.
Which means we call you the normals.
Yes.
So there are the early votes.
Oh my God, we have Clark numbers, Elizabeth. Let me interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Clark numbers. Steve Sisolak 56-33 over Chris Giuliani in the early vote. That is a huge lead. That race is going to be very difficult for her to win now. I think she's in big trouble. Hopefully we can get some of the other results up now from the control room.
Explain to the...
Let's see if we can put that up. The governor's race in Clark County, 56-34. I don't see how she's going to recover from that. That's a 13,000 vote lead after early voting. And that is devastating for her to only get 34% of the vote in Clark County. Maybe the reporters can look at Washoe County to see if those numbers have come in now. But we'll be the first to say, and here on Indy TV, looks like a very, very difficult uphill road for Chris Giuliani now. We're going to try to get those numbers up for you. I hope the reporters are checking for these other races as soon as we can get them. I'm sending messages on my computer as we're talking here, but you wanted the numbers. The raw numbers, 33,119 to 20,017. That again, it's a 13,000 vote lead. There are not so many votes out that I think that's going to be of a help to her. Those are not good numbers for her.
Can we clarify for our viewers who may not be as intimately familiar as we are? So what we're talking about right now with these numbers that we're finally seeing out of Clark County is early vote, mail, and absentee. Correct? Are we talking about precincts? We're just talking about early vote, correct?
We're just talking about early and
absentee and mail.
Yeah, and absentee and mail. We have some numbers up now. I have to tell you that I'm not sure what these are. So I can't really tell you what they are. I'm on the... Yeah, voter turnout we don't really care about. I'm looking for the numbers from Clark County and Washoe County in the state, if we have them, on the governor's race. That's what we're looking for. But I'm telling you, these first numbers from Clark County are devastating to Chris Giuliani. I think she's going to find it very difficult to recover. Adam Laxalt, we can call the race for governor already. He has 27,390 votes. Dan Schwartz has 4,000 votes. And Jared Fisher can get back to riding bikes. He has 2,000 votes, and so that's devastating. In the lieutenant governor's race, Michael Roberson's going to win easily. He's got a lead of 52-18 in Clark County against Brent Jones. Bob Beers is going to be the Republican nominee for state treasurer. Most of these other races, Wes Duncan is beating Craig Mueller 61-31, so 2-1 there. Alyssa Kadish has 40% of the vote to 25% for Jerry Tao. Those two are going to move on to the general election. I'd like to get the Congressional District 3 and Congressional District 4 numbers if we can find those, folks. But those are the numbers. Big news, Christian Giuliani's in big trouble in the governor's race. I don't see how she recovers from that, Elizabeth. And now you should talk for a while so I can look for results.
I will do the best I can. And thanks for calling all those numbers out. I was scribbling wildly as you were talking. So now I can kind of recap since you went so quickly and make sure everyone's clear on where we really stand. So number one, first off the top, we're feel comfortable calling the race on the Republican side in the gubernatorial contest for Adam Laxalt. 27,000 votes to only 4,000 something for Dan Schwartz, his next closest.
There's the Congressional District 3 numbers. Looks like Danny Tarkanian, my eyes are maybe deceiving me, but and now they've taken it off.
See it either.
So we're, but it looks like he had 46% of the vote or so. Is that correct? You can tell me in the control room. Am I seeing that correctly? 42.5, and Michelle Mortensen has 25.8. So Danny Tarkanian is going to win that race in Congressional District 3. And what are those Congressional District 4 numbers? We can focus on those. This is only the Clark County part of the district. Stephen Horsford has 63.99. Horsford is going to win that race as well, no matter what happens in rural Nevada. So we got those numbers for you first too. We're going to have stories up on the ones that we've already called. We are very close, I have to tell you, to calling the Democratic side of the governor's race. As soon as I see the Washoe County numbers, if one of my reporters can look for that. Keep those numbers up on the screen for just a second, and maybe they can bring the monitor closer so I can actually read those numbers, because I'm old, Elizabeth.
Yes, we're sorry,
these
guys.
young kids here don't understand that old people can't see as well. So Stephen Horsford, 63%. Of the vote. He's crushing everybody. Pat Spearman has 15%. That race is over. Let's go back, just scroll up a little bit to the Congressional 3 numbers again on the Republican side. Danny Tarkanian at 43%, Michelle Mortensen at 26% or so, and Scott Hammond at 16%. You just can't make up, in a low turnout primary, you can't make up those kind of deficits on Election Day. If we can find anything in Washoe County, let me know. Let me tell you another result here. It'll be interesting. Elizabeth, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but people want the numbers.
They do.
That hotly contested Democratic primary for Clark County Commission, where Tick Segerblum, the state senator, is running against Marco Hernandez, who's supported by the laborers. You have Tick Segerblum with a lead. Can't call this one yet, 53-47. He only has a 400 vote lead in that race. And I think our Riley Snyder has just tweeted that the DA's race, which will end tonight in Clark County, Steve Wolfson has a 57-42 lead. That race we can call too. There's not enough votes to change that. Steve Wolfson is going to be reelected as the district attorney. And so, Elizabeth, I'll let it go back to you, and I'll keep trolling for numbers.
Okay, great. Wow, that was a lot of numbers. Folks, we recommend that you check the primary results page on our website, even as you're listening to us. Our live stream is at the top of that page, but if you scroll down on that primary results page, we're going to start putting green check marks next to the names of the candidates who we're calling races for right now. And I want to take a moment to explain why John Ralston feels so comfortable calling some of these races right now, because it may seem to some of you that after, just having these early vote returns in, that, wow, shouldn't we wait until all the precincts report? Shouldn't we wait and see whether some of these races can be turned? But the fact is that such a high percentage of people vote in the early vote and by mail and by absentee, that when you get those early returns and those report, and you know that you're only going to have a certain percentage of voters that are going to turn out today on election day, you can extrapolate that math. You can figure out, well, even if we had the highest turnout day we've ever had on election day, there's only so many votes that can be made up once those early votes and absentee and mail are counted. So that's what we're talking about when we're calling these races, as we're saying, based on our experience, based on history, based on the numbers and what we can expect to see in turnout. Some of these races simply cannot be turned around at this point.
Let me give you some more numbers our crack team in the control room is giving to us. Jackie Valley, who covers the school district, tells us that Kevin Child, the incumbent, who's been very controversial, is getting crushed by Irene Cepeda, 46-25. He's going to lose that race. Joe Lombardo is going to be reelected as the Clark County Sheriff. He has 75% of the vote. I want my reporters can check more into this, Elizabeth, but in the nationally covered race for a little Assembly District 36, the Clark County numbers show that Dennis Hoff is losing. The brothel kingpin is losing to James Oscarson, but not by an insurmountable margin. And I'm not sure. I believe that's they're the numbers right there. And he is winning by about 65 votes, it looks like. But that's only the Clark part of the district. I believe there's a Nye part of the district, too. Maybe someone could find the Nye part of that. Michelle Rendells is the expert on that race. But those are good numbers for James Oscarson down here. But the Nye County numbers are going to be key. We can't call that one yet. So let me say again, I hope someone's checking the Washoe County Registrar's site, hint, hint, reporters, to see if there are numbers there for the governor's race, because I think that Chris Giuliani may have insurmountable lead here in Clark County. I'm gathering, thanks to Natalie, who, by the way, Natalie Keeney is the person who really runs the Nevada Independent, and Elizabeth will not argue with me on that. She tells me that there's no Washoe numbers quite yet. But maybe we can go on to the Clark County results and just slowly go through those for now then. Let us know in the control room if the Secretary of State's website has statewide results. But let's go to the Clark County results and just start at the top of the state races, and let's go through the numbers and show people exactly what is going on in Clark County. Elizabeth, people know that Clark County is going to have 65 or 70% of the entire vote. This is the early vote. We've already talked about Chris Giuliani getting crushed in Clark County by 23 points by Steve Sisolak. Very tough for her to make that up outside of Clark County. It's possible, but highly unlikely. If you go down a little bit, you'll see the Republican side there. We have that on the screen for you. Adam Laxalt is going to win that primary easily. Donald Trump will be very, very happy, and I'm sure send out a congratulatory
I'm sure
tweet.
There'll be a tweet any moment.
Do you want to read some of these? Do you want me to just keep reading, Elizabeth?
Go right ahead. You're doing a
All right,
fantastic
keep going.
job.
Kate Marshall the Democrat for lieutenant governor, didn't have an opponent. Michael Roberson, who is Adam Laxalt's coffee fetcher and best buddy, is winning easily over Brent Jones, the former assemblyman conservative who ran a campaign trying to remind everyone that Michael Roberson pushed through the largest tax increase in history. But Michael Roberson is winning. He only got 51% of the vote, but that's more than enough in a multi-candidate field to crush Brent Jones and the rest.
Let me just put in a word. So Michael Roberson, not only a good friend and colleague of nominee Adam Laxalt, but Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans, been in Republican politics for a few cycles, knows his way around the electorate very, very well. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Roberson against Kate Marshall for lieutenant governor. Of course, she was state treasurer two cycles ago, but she's kind of been off the radar for a while, so she's going to have some work to do.
She ran against Mark Amodei for Congress and lost in that special election in 2011.
So we know. So that I love it when we can call the matchup. So it's going to be Marshall v. Roberson and lieutenant governor.
We can keep going, though. We can just show people here what's happening. No race for Barbara Sagaski, the incumbent, the Secretary of State's office. Bob Beers didn't really have a strong opponent. He's the former city councilman who just lost, but couldn't bear the thought of not having an elected title, so immediately ran for state treasurer. He is going to win that primary easily. and State Senate Majority Leader Aaron Ford is going to be the Democratic nominee for Attorney General. We already
surprise there.
Knew that. Wes Duncan, spirited campaign by Craig Mueller, but he's going to lose 2-1 there in Clark County. These, again, are only Clark County numbers, but those margins are so big, and they're only early vote and mail voting, but those numbers are so big it doesn't matter. Alyssa Kadish and Jerry Tao, we knew that we were going to be the two going on to the general election, and she is going to win that in the primary fairly easily with 40% in Clark County to Tao's 25%. We don't know what the outside Clark County numbers. Susie Lee, of course, is going to win the Congressional District 3 nomination. AP is already called Laxalt for governor, and Rosen and Heller and Susie Lee, but we did the harder races first. AP goes for the low-hanging fruit,
Sorry,
Elizabeth.
AP.
So, yeah. So, no Washoe numbers yet. We need those. We do need some of the rural counties. But unless Chris Giuliani is winning by a huge margin and those record turnout that Ben Margiat talked about in Washoe, if she is not winning by a huge margin there, this race is over. And so as soon as we get those Washoe numbers, we will know a lot more about the governor's race. But she has to be hugely disappointed only getting 34%. Now, I would urge everybody who's watching Indy TV right now, if you want the results, you can go on the Independent site. We're starting to post stories now for the races that we have called. And Elizabeth and I are just going to be numbers junkies for most of the rest of the night, trying to get numbers to you as soon as they come in. We are not quite calling the Democratic race for governor, but I will tell you that I believe Steve Sisolak is going to be the nominee unless some very strange things are happening outside of Clark County, and unless some very strange things happened on Election Day to close that margin. Elizabeth Tick Segerblum in the fight for his life for a county commission seat that has riven the labor movement and gotten Sheldon Adelson, the Republican mega donor, to give Tick Segerblum's opponent a lot of money, teaming up with the laborers. And some people have rightly noted that Adelson and the laborers were also together in another cause, and that was to build the Raiders stadium. So maybe we should put up some of the legislative results in Clark County and go through those.
Yeah, let's do that, and then we can circle back around. We're still waiting on our Washoe numbers. We are religiously checking the Washoe numbers, so we promise we'll interrupt ourselves to report those. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the legislative races and see where they stand.
All right, there's the state senate for District 8. Maryland Dondero Loop, who was embraced by the party to take that open seat, won, and Valerie Weber, embraced by the Republicans, won, but not that easily against two spirited opponents. Elizabeth Helgalian, I think that's how you pronounce it. Used to be Elizabeth Halsett, the former state senator. She's finishing in third place to Dan Rodimer, the former wrestler. Valerie Weber is going to easily win that primary. So it'll be Weber and Loop, which is a very interesting race for the state senate. Both are former legislators. Elizabeth Melanie Scheibel in State Senate District 9 was a Democratic choice in that open seat, and she is going to win that primary easily. Ivana Cancelo, who was appointed to Reuben Kewin's State Senate District, is winning 60-40 there, and so she is going to win that. There's not enough votes left in that district for Bryce Henderson to come back. She's going to be the nominee. Paul Aisley, trying to make a comeback, the former assemblyman, is getting crushed in that primary. He will not be making a comeback. Julie Pizzina was actually embraced by the caucus, and so she's going to win there. Keith Pickard, our John Smith wrote about this race. Byron Brooks was initially embraced by the Republican establishment. Then when Pickard, the current assemblyman, decided to run for that seat, they embraced him. He is going to be the Republican nominee in State Senate District 20. So it's going to be Pizzina and Pickard, as we thought. James Orenshaw is the Democratic anointed one in State Senate District 21. And he is going to win that primary as expected. Our crack team's going to get the assembly races up, I think, pretty quickly here.
Can I get a clarification from you?
Sure.
So I scribbled wildly the whole time you were running.
I do talk fast. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I kept up, but I just want to make sure of one thing. So, did you call the race for Horsford? We're at 63%. We're calling that over.
Oh, yes. I mean, there are rural numbers to come in, but he is just so far ahead in that race. I think we can call it.
Okay, so we've got Horsford, Tarkanian, and Laxalt called. We're going to hold off on calling the Sisolak-Christie race just in case there's some wild anomaly that comes out of Washoe or the rurals, correct? We're going to hold off on that?
I think we should.
Okay.
But I am telling you, I think that the big news of the night so far is Sisolak's margin in early voting in Clark County is absolutely huge. I said if he was up by 10 points that he probably couldn't lose the race. He's up by 23 points, so you can judge from there unless there's something very anomalous happening. I'm hoping my reporters are checking the other site. The other sites.
That they are.
They are.
Yes,
okay.
they're
Because they're
diligently checking.
They listen to you better than they listen to me, as always. So let's take a look at those assembly numbers. We're going to put those up now so you can see what's going on in these legislative races. Very close race. I don't think we can call that one. That's been very spirited. In State Assembly District 2, that's John Hambrick's seat. He's the incumbent who is going to be nominated again. He's a former speaker. He beat Jim Small, who I thought, by the way, had the best slogan of the entire cycle. Think big, vote small. I love that. I thought that was pretty clever. But it's not clever enough to win. And so I'm sure he's not going to be happy with the consolation award of my kudos. Connie Monk is easily going to be the Democratic nominee in State Assembly District 4. That's where Richard MacArthur, who is down there, you can see with the check mark from is ahead, 51 to 28. He's going to easily win that race. There were a lot of moderate Republicans who wanted to knock off MacArthur in the primary, Elizabeth. That did not work out. State Assembly District 5, Jason Burke looks like he is going to win that race, although he's only ahead by 59 votes, and so we can't call that one yet. Jason Fryerson's going to easily be reelected in District 8. Linda Cannon is going to be the Republican nominee there in District 9. District 12, a lot of candidates in there, but Susan Martinez is well ahead of the field in that Democratic primary. She's going to win that. Tom Roberts is defeating perennial candidate Steve Sanson, who I'm sure will complain and whine and run again.
As many candidates
in District
do.
50, yes, indeed. In District 15, Lou Tooman trying to make a comeback. The former assemblyman who's been every party that you can be in the state is getting crushed, not surprisingly. Howard Watts, who jumped in there, has a substantial lead, 200 votes or so. 43 to 32, if I'm reading that correctly. I can't quite call that yet, but it looks like Howard Watts is going to win that race. Yep. And so and the next one is District 18. Matt Sadler is ahead, 56 to 41. Not sure there's enough votes to make that up that are left. Sharon Arrington is going to be the Republican nominee in 21. Christy Watson is winning in a landslide to become the Democratic nominee in 22, while Melissa Hardy is defeating Richard Bunce. This is interesting, Elizabeth. This isn't over yet, but it's a big lead for Melissa Hardy. In there, it's Richard Bunce who was defeated by Michael Roberson in his race, and then embraced by the Republican establishment as they tried to reach out to some of the Ron Paul people and some of the fringe players in the party. Richard Bunce is losing, not
a bad showing though.
Well, he still has a chance if he had a big election day showing, but it does. I don't think Melissa Hardy can lose that race unless Richard Bunce got a big showing, and he was endorsed by Michael Roberson, the state Senate Republican leader and candidate for lieutenant governor. Now the guy with the best name on the ballot.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Glenn Levitt. Anyone have any? Never mind. Glenn Levitt
After the show.
is well ahead in State Assembly District 23 for the Republican nomination. Leslie Cohen is the incumbent in Assembly District 29. She's going to win easily, and I believe she's going to face Steven Silberkraus, who tried to orchestrate the recalls and hid from the media for a long time. Let's go to the next one, District 34. Looks like Janice Weston's going to win that one. Well, no, it's very close. You can't call that one yet. Very, very close. What's that, 20 votes, or do my eyes deceive me, Elizabeth?
It's a small number. I find it fascinating in these assembly races, especially when you look at the small number of total votes, and then the margin, I mean, even if it's 10, 20, 30%, it's still a relatively small number.
Right, 22 votes. 22
these races
votes
are
there.
decided on a hairline.
Very, very close. So we can't call that one yet. Michelle Gorlow is ahead, not by an insurmountable margin, but a solid margin there. Here's an interesting one, Elizabeth. District 35, the Republican Amy Jones is the wife of Brent Jones, who was the former assemblyman and was running for lieutenant governor. She is losing, and by a substantial margin, to David Schoen.
It's my turn to interrupt you
Yay.
now, finally.
Because my vote's getting hoarse. I'm going to drink.
Riley Snyder in the control room. We're watching Washoe County, and we're not sure what's going on. We know that 3 precincts have reported, but we don't have any numbers yet that are showing from Washoe County. But Riley just told me that the New York Times, who must have a direct line into these precincts, Amadei right now crushing Sharon Angle, 1,210 votes to 257. Again, that's based on a fairly...
That's the congressman from District 2.
Yes, and Sharon Angle, who needs no explanation, I don't think, in this state. So Amadei way up. We're getting these early vote tabulations in for Washoe County. Anjanette Damon of the Review...
Reno Gazette-Journal.
Thank you. Reno Gazette-Journal up in Reno reporting that Hillary Sheevey, the sitting mayor, has a healthy lead with 64% of the vote. Lorton's in second with just 19%.
Healthy.
Pretty healthy. And then the third and fourth place candidates are only at about 4% each. So Sheevey's looking good for mayor up in Reno. Those are some
good numbers to have. I'm wondering why Washoe is not reporting. Washoe County numbers are up, I'm being told.
Okay, great.
In my ear. Can we see them?
Yes. Soon.
Yes. Where are they?
They're coming.
Make them magically appear here on Indy TV at UNLV.
Here we go.
Let's see the numbers.
Here's the numbers. 6,937 votes for Chris G. She beat him in Washoe.
But that is expected, though. But that's not a crushing. That's 1,600 votes. Let's put that in perspective now, Elizabeth, with how many votes he was winning by in Clark County. And I
can do the math.
Yes, it doesn't help him. She needed to win outside of Clark County by 2-1. I can say with great confidence that it's nearly impossible for Chris Giuliani to win this race. Steve Sisolak is going to be the Democratic nominee for governor, barring a miracle.
By about 11,000 votes as it stands right now. All right, here are the numbers out of Washoe.
So you look at those Washoe numbers, and Elizabeth, if you can remind me of the Clark County numbers. I know it was 56 to 33. What was the vote margin? Was it about 20,000 votes?
13,000.
13,000 votes. So that does very little to cut into that lead. That takes 1,600 votes. So she better be winning by 80-20 in the rural Nevada, which we already know she is not. So I just don't see, unless she has a huge showing on Election Day, how she can possibly be the gubernatorial nominee for the Democrats. Let's go down, if we can, and see some other results. And this is Washoe County, we're reminding everybody. Only Washoe County. Adam Laxalt, again, just absolutely destroying the field as we thought he would. And Dan Schwartz, full of sound and fury. And what's the rest of that?
Well, Dan Schwartz conceding on Twitter a few minutes ago.
I would think so.
Thanking his supporters, saying he's grateful, congratulating Adam Laxalt, saying Laxalt has his vote in November.
And I'm sure he'll be out there on the stump campaigning for him, too. Let's look at the lieutenant governor's numbers if we can. There's no real race on the Democratic side. And again, Michael Roberson absolutely crushing Brent Jones. He got about 50% there, had about 50% in Clark County as well. That people may point, oh, that looks like a weak showing. He barely got 50%, but that means nothing, and it certainly means nothing for the general election, Elizabeth. Let's keep going and see what else we have in Washoe County here. Secretary of State, there's not a race on either side. It's going to be Barbara Sagaski, the incumbent, against Nelson Araujo, the assemblyman. Bob Beers is winning in a landslide up in Washoe, as he is in Clark County. We've already called that race, just as we've called for Aaron Ford and for Wes Duncan, who I believe will be right below him there. You can show those numbers below if they're there somewhere. There they are. And Wes Duncan is crushing Craig Mueller up there too, and so he's winning. Ben Kekeffer, who was the state senator, was subject of a lot of sturm and drang from Gary Schmidt, who's run all the time. There was a lawsuit kicking him off the ballot, then he got back on the ballot. He made a lot of noise, but again, Gary Schmidt is going to lose to Ben Kekeffer. Let's keep going. Assembly District 24. This is an interesting race. Dion Contine, who was the anointed candidate, the former tax director, is absolutely getting her clock cleaned. In fact, she's in third place. Now, I have to tell you, very knowledgeable Washoe County political operative told me privately a month ago that we shouldn't be paying as close attention to Dion Contine, that she was going to finish in third place. I'm going to trust that guy from now on. He was right on. She is not going to. That race, by the way, I believe, just go back to that 1 second. Thank you so much. Is our control room the best, Elizabeth? They're right on top. This race is going to end, I believe, tonight because there's no Republican or third-party candidates in here. And so that race is going to be over, and it looks like someone nobody heard of, Sarah Peters, is going to win against some much better-known Dion Contine in that race. That's going to crushing blow for her. Remember, she left the taxation department to run for office, and she's going to have lost that race. Keep going now. We'll check and see what else we have here. This is a Republican primary. It's Alexis Hansen is crushing Tom Franzway. Alexis Hansen is the wife of Ira Hansen, and she is now running for his seat as he's running for the state Senate. Alexis Hansen is going to easily win the nomination there. There's a county commission race up there in the Washoe County. Bob Lucey's the chairman, I believe, of the Washoe County Commission. He is crushing the competition there with only almost 60% of the vote, as his colleague Kitty Jung is also winning with 3/4 of the vote there in District 3. We can keep going. And there's another county commission race where Greg Smith, who was the late Debbie Smith, the former legislator's husband, is losing very close race right now. It's not over yet,
it's tight.
But he's losing a very, very close race. Okay, we can go through some of these local races. Let's see if we can find the mayor's numbers. Are they below the county numbers? Probably. Keep going. There's sheriff. Hang on. Let's look at sheriff real quickly. And that's a multi-way race, and you have one candidate, Darren Ball. Is that Balsam? With 50% of the vote. He's winning 2-1 over Heidi Howe. And so that is a crushing win there for him. Let's look at the mayor's race. We quoted Anjanette Damon's numbers. Hillary Sheevey with a huge lead there, 4-1. 3.5-1 over Eddie Lorton. The way it works there, though, Elizabeth, is the top two go on to the general election. So getting 50% or more does not help Hillary Sheevey. It'll be Hillary Sheevey and Eddie Lorton in the general. We can take a quick look at those council races for anyone who's watching Indy TV and might be interested. We have Naomi Dewar, who's the incumbent, winning easily there in District 2, and Paul McKenzie. Paul McKenzie is losing. He's the incumbent there at the Reno. That's a big upset to Bonnie Weber, who used to be on the Washoe County Commission.
Yeah.
That's a big upset, and that's a fairly substantial lead. Not insurmountable, perhaps, but that's a pretty big lead in a small district. We're told by our crack crew in the control room that the Secretary of State is finally posting some numbers. We're going to tell you what those are. Big news of the night so far is that that it looks as if Steve Sisolak is going to win the Democratic governor's race, unless June Giuliani is having a miraculous finish in rural Nevada. Let's see if we have any governor's races. Let's see if we can see those statewide numbers. Let's see if we can see that. If the folks here could move that monitor a little bit closer, I'd be able to see it. And they're zooming in on it for me.
Thanks for zooming.
Too. That's very nice. So the statewide is 53-37. Let's see where the numbers are coming from. I can't quite see them all. There's that Clark County 13,000 vote lead. The Lyon County numbers we knew. She's even in populous Lander County, 54-52 votes there. So that doesn't really mean that much. But Sisolak is winning in Nye County too, which is a relatively a large rural county. Douglas is the biggest one for the Republicans, but it does not look I just don't see how she can win this race now, Elizabeth. She needed a much stronger showing in Washoe. I got all these people from Washoe County telling me, I haven't talked to one person who voted for Steve Sisolak. Well, you missed 5,346 people, folks, who voted for Steve Sisolak. Christian Kiliani's going to lose this race. Elizabeth, I think,
it looks like
pretty clear.
I don't see it going any other way.
And I think we can call that race for Sisolak. There's just, I don't see, unless there was some miraculous showing on election day for her.
I mean, I'm looking at this list, and I don't know them by heart, but I'm looking at this list of all the other counties. I mean, even if every single Democratic vote in every single rural county went her way, I still don't think it's enough to make up that difference. And of course, that's not going to happen. Even if she were to win 70-30, 80-20, it's still not going to be enough to make up that difference. I
see there's a quote out, a tweet out. We should put this up, Natalie. We should, I do want to see that tweet on the screen with Laxalt talking about his future Democratic opponent. This is actually pretty good. They're going to call me a puppet for the president. They already are. But who are the career politicians who failed Clark County? They did. So he's going to be calling Steve Sisolak a career politician who failed Clark County. That's an interesting tactic. Could be very, very potent unless people think that Clark County has not failed.
Well, unless they think it's wildly successful, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not selling that to the Clark County voters. It all depends on your perspective.
Yeah. Yep. Let's try to get more of those statewide numbers up in some of the big races.
Fascinating to me. Can I just say? Can I interrupt us just to say something and give you a break for 1 second?
Yep.
So we talked before we went on the air tonight. The reporters were asking, and the crew here asking, like, what time do you think we'll be on the air until tonight? And we said, well, you never know. I mean, there's been times we've been able to call every race by, 9 or 9:30. Sometimes it goes 10:30, 11, midnight, unless I'm mistaken. And we haven't, by the way, gotten to CD2 and Senate, mostly because they're foregone conclusions, but we'll get to that.
I will be interested to see. Let's take a look. Let's take a look right now at the statewide results in that U.S. Senate primary, because I'd be interested to see if Dean Heller is getting 80% of the vote or 40% of the vote. That'll be really, really interesting.
So the point I was making while we're waiting for the Senate numbers to come up is that here it's 8:20 at night. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we've called every major race in the state. We got a few legislative races, a few local races that we're still not quite sure.
Let's see the details on Dean Heller, but that is a huge number for him. He's got to be very, very happy with that number. People thought, maybe he has base problems.
Doesn't look like it.
Does not look like it at all. He's running against a bunch of unknowns. Tom Heck is probably only getting votes because he was confused with Joe Heck.
Yeah.
And so Dean Heller, that's a huge showing for Dean Heller. He has no problems with the Republican base. That's got to be a huge relief for him. I know you wanted to look at the CD2 numbers as well.
Yeah, I mean, we should look at all
the Amity Sharon Angle numbers.
I'd like to take a look at CD2 if we can, if we've got any more reporting there. They're looking for it right now. So yeah, 8:20 at night, and here we are, and I almost can't believe it. But
actually, if I could stop them from pulling up the CD2 numbers,
sure.
Now that we have rural results, and we need to look at the CD4 race, because that, even though we called it for Horsford, we should take a look and see in CD4 what the rural numbers are, just to make sure there's nothing crazy going on. There it is. So he has 64%, even with rural Nevada. Let's just, if you can scroll down a little bit, let me take a look at those. Yeah, there's nothing strange happening in rural Nevada. There's no way he's a lock to win that, and he's winning easily. Pat Spearman is not going to be a happy camper going back to Carson City, I don't think.
Well, she likes Carson City, doesn't she?
And that's a crushing win for Stephen Horsford. Another testament to the culinary union. But let's take a look at the Republican side real quickly on that, if we can, of CD4. Yeah, that one right there. Crescent Hardy has 45%. David Gibbs, the former Clark County Republican Party chairman, right?
Yes.
Has 21%. That race is over as well. So it's going to be Hardy and Horsford. It's a rematch.
It's a rematch.
And so Hardy upset Horsford 4 years ago.
Yes.
And so that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, with a different president in the White House and a different set of issues, and maybe a different kind of wave in Nevada this year. That'll be a big race to watch.
Yep, it's going to be. So let's take a look at CD2, as Elizabeth wanted to look at that.
We just like to see the numbers. We like to geek out on these things now that we can sort of relax. There it is, Amade. Whoops, yes. 73%. To a 17% showing for Sharon Angle.
Sharon Angle,
I'm surprised
close again, Elizabeth.
I'm
Just
surprised
like
she pulled in that much. You know, she
got crushed by Joe Heck in a primary a couple cycles ago, right?
But ever since that brutal loss to Harry Reid, she just, everyone hung their hopes on her in the Republican Party that year, and there was just so much disappointment. She lost a lot of support when she lost the race that year. Obviously, she's still got a portion of the base that's very faithful to her, but Mark Amade looks like he's going to have no trouble skating through in a district that's considered red all the way. No surprises there.
And I can say this, and Sharon Angle, you can't use this now. It's too late. Mark Amade is the new favorite Republican congressman of where? MSNBC. He's on MSNBC all the time, and look, it didn't hurt him. MSNBC. So the Republican base loves MSNBC. What do you think? In CD2?
No, I just don't think it hurts him. I mean, he's always got a pithy remark. He's a pretty reasonable guy on most issues. I mean, he's likable. I mean, no, that's not gonna hurt him. Not with only Sharon Angle running against him.
What I would love to see, if anybody can find it for us, Elizabeth, one race we've been following because it's become an issue in the governor's race is Gerald Antonaro, the controversial sheriff in Story County. Is on the ballot. He's been accused of all kinds of depredations, including sexual harassment. He endorsed Adam Laxalt and Wes Duncan. They have refused to run away from him. Laxalt claiming he's investigating him. There's no evidence of an investigation. In fact, he keeps saying there's one, but we published a story by our intern, Sonny Brown, a great story, did great reporting showing that there may not be an investigation at all. We'd love to be able to find some results in Story County. I don't know if those are available yet or not. And so let's maybe what we should do is go through the statewide result. The Story County numbers, I'm told, are not in yet for that sheriff's race, but we'll keep an eye on that. I guess we should see if there's any updates in any of these races. If we can check the Clark County site and the Secretary of State site, maybe we should just scroll through some of the results on the Secretary of State site, Elizabeth, and see what we have. What do you think? Yeah, let's do that if we can. I'm going to scroll through Twitter also here. We've got a lot of Twitter comments coming our way. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Let's start at the top of the Secretary of State and just go through the results in case. And I know it's unlikely that everyone has not been glued to Indy TV from the beginning, but just in case anyone has not been, let's go through. Let's start at the top and see. And maybe while we're going through some of these results, we can bring the very patient David Damore back up to provide some insight. So let's get the results up, and we'll bring David Damore up. So let's go to the top of the Secretary of State's page. Okay, that's great. Featured races from the Secretary of State. These are races to watch. Wow, that's great. Now let's get David Damore up there, and he can comment on some of these as well. And let's go through and. Let's take a look again, and we'll go through them in order. We'll go CD4, then the Supreme Court, then that state Senate race, then Attorney General, Clark County District Attorney, which we haven't talked about much, and that Dennis Hoff. Dennis Hoff is actually ahead. Let's click on that Assembly race. Dennis Hoff is ahead. Wow. Dennis Hoff is actually ahead and by about 60 votes. It looks like less than that. I'm sorry, my math is not good. 43 votes. He is ahead. Let's scroll down a little bit on that. Yeah, I'm trying to see. So yes, I was afraid that the results might change dramatically with just the Clark numbers. The 9 numbers, he's winning 2.5 to 1. That's where the really conservative Republicans are. Yeah. Clark is where Oscarson is doing well, but that 21% that Joseph Bradley is getting is really a problem for Oscarson. That race is going to be very, very close. A lot of Republicans are worried about Dennis Hoff being in the legislature, the brothel kingpin. And so we'll keep an eye on that one once the update goes. Let's go back to the top of the page, and let's take a look at these CD4 numbers, and we'll get David Damore to weigh in on that, Elizabeth, if that's okay. There they are. So there are those numbers. Professor, go down a little bit more so we can see all of them. There you go. And so it's 64% to 15% to 8%. I mean, it's just totally crushing.
You're totally crushing. You're absolutely right. And you have just too many candidates there to get behind them, right? Everybody's getting, what, less than, what, Spearman, second highest IDO to figure, you know, form a region in there, 5%. I mean, the horse was just too well known, and he had the resources in that race. It's going to be really, really tough to beat with that many candidates.
I thought Patricia Arquette weighing in late might have carried Pat Spearman, but no.
That's a little bit of John
that did not occur.
Yeah.
So Horsford looking very strong going into the general against Crescent Hardy. You think anything's different from 4 years ago when Crescent Hardy pulled off what I consider one of the biggest upsets in the history of the state?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because you think about that was a second-tier race for everybody. Nobody had thought about it. You look at the registration numbers, the demography of it, and then the early
Democrats
vote.
have a huge lead, double-digit lead or close to it.
And then nothing, you know, early vote come in, there's nothing, and then the Republican outside money just dominated that race at the end. And I don't think you'll see Horsford make that mistake again. And I don't think you'll see Culinary sit that race out again. So I think it'll be a very, very different dynamic here. If the Democrats are serious about taking out the House, they have to hold 3 and 4 here.
That's right. That's one of the interesting things about Nevada this time. There's all this talk about the Democrats maybe taking over the House. This is a place, and there's very few states like this. I think I found maybe 2 others, but there may only be 1 other where they're playing defense in a couple of seats. They have to hold those. You can't, if you're trying to take over the House, it's just like the Senate where they're playing, the Republicans are playing defense here with Heller, and the Democrats are trying to take it. You can't lose seats when you're trying to take over.
And if you look at the 3rd district 2 years ago, very, very close. I mean, Tarkane almost pulls that out.
2,000 votes, I think
and Trump
it was.
carries that district.
And Trump won CD3.
So, I mean, that's not, there's no gimme for Susie Lee in that district at all.
That's right.
So those will be hard fought. I think Horsford, obviously, just the numbers are better for the Democrats in the 4th, and you're going to have a candidate with name ID. We'll see how much energy Crescent Hardy can bring to the fight and how many resources he can bring into that race there.
It's going to be very interesting. Clearly, the Republicans want to flip those seats because that would almost assure that they can hold on to the House if they were able to flip those seats.
Absolutely. There's no guarantee. I mean, Susie Lee's, she's well funded, but she's virtually unknown. And that Tarkanian name is household.
Absolutely. He starts with a huge advantage.
In Nevada. In fact, I think, honestly, this might be his best chance ever. To win, quite frankly, just based on the way that district can be swingy, the fact that, yes, she'll have money, but so will he, because the Republicans do not want to give up that seat. Trump has gotten behind him. That's going to be a knockdown. That's going to be a knockdown drag.
And more generally, that's the type of district, if the Democrats do want to win, they have to win. They have to win those suburban seats where you might have fiscally conservative voters who might not be excited about Trump on some of the social issues there. That's the real test for them, not just here, but of course nationally.
So. And I'm going to piggyback onto that and say it's going to come down to retail politics for her. She is going to need to get out there. She acknowledged that today and talk to voters in person, knock on doors, go to events. I mean, she's going to have to work very, very hard to get her name out there. So I know she's got the money. I hope she's got the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's go back to the top of the Secretary of State's website if we can again and take a look at some of these other races and get the professor while we have him here to weigh in. Let's take a look at at the district attorney's race if we can. That's being decided tonight. It looks like.
Explain to the viewers, if you would, John, why that's being decided tonight. Because it's a Democrat on. I mean, why is that being decided tonight? Why do we have 2 Democrats and then that's the end of it?
Yeah, this is crazy, right? And it's going to say, well, people are going to say, wait a second, only the Democrats are electing the next district attorney.
That's right.
And it didn't used to work this way, but I believe it was in 2015. I missed this. Everyone missed this. Someone was upset about an incumbent, of course, about how that law works. So they passed an incumbent, they snuck it into a bigger elections bill, an incumbent protection kind of bill, which means that if the other party or an independent or smaller party candidate doesn't file, that the race ends in the primary. And it is ending with a crushing victory, it looks like, by Steve Wolfson. This is really interesting, though, Professor, in the sense that there was no reason to think that Wolfson was unpopular at all, but suddenly there was this RJ story that came out that talked about him doing a favor for an assistant that had a gambling problem, a favor that maybe only she could have gotten was the implication. A few days later, right before the end of filing, Rob Langford, a progressive liberal attorney, got in and he's gotten a lot of help from some outside money. And Steve Wolfson may have spent, I don't know, Elizabeth, maybe close to $1 million. He spent a ton of money. we'll know at the end. Money still matters, right? Even in a primary.
He did not want to lose.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you've seen this unfold across the country, where you've seen some liberal challengers to sitting district attorneys. All of them, I believe, have come up short. I think 1 and 1. I think somewhere in California, week before. But that's a very powerful position. It's one of those things that people don't really think about, like who's the attorney or who the prosecutor is. But it's a huge issue. Lots of resources, lots of decisions every day about who goes to jail and who does not.
Yeah. And how that process goes and how bail works. And we've had some interesting opinion pieces on our site in the past few weeks, actually, where Wolfson's name was mentioned a time or two, which I find fascinating. So some interesting local issues there.
Wolfson's an interesting guy, too, because he, I believe, is clearly interested in the higher office. I think he thought about running for Attorney General before Ford, the Democratic leader, closed him out. They actually approached him to run for the U.S. Senate. Some people did, and he turned that down, and Jackie Rosen got the nod from the great grand poobah whose office is now over at the Bellagio, named Harry Reid, who still can anoint and unanoint candidates. But I think he's an ambitious guy, and he's got to feel really good tonight about that crushing win. He's now safe again for 4 years. He could run for something else in 2 years, because another thing that should not exist, elected officials don't have to resign to run. Someone should pass a resign to run law. Do you think that'll ever happen, Elizabeth?
Never.
That's exactly.
You have to come from the ballot initiative.
Yeah, they have to come from a ballot initiative. All right, let's take a look at the Secretary of State's website again. And again, I hope our reporters and our folks in the control room are keeping an eye for any vote updates, because we will bring those to you as soon as we can. Let's take a look at the Attorney General's race on both sides, if we can. I'd like to get the professor's take on this. You look at the Democratic. You don't have to put the details up for this. I mean, Senator Ford and former Assemblyman Duncan, who used to be a deputy attorney general under Adam Laxalt. This is one of the more interesting races. Our poll, I believe, Elizabeth, you can refresh my memory, showed that Ford was ahead, I think even by double digits, but nobody knows who these guys are, right? And so this is one of those really interesting races, it seems to me, that could be decided by what happens at the top of the ticket.
To some degree, absolutely. And then you think about 4 years ago, why Adam Laxalt wins that is you also had the Republican Attorney General's Governor Association throw in $3 million in that race.
That's right.
So that's another race now.
They helped him win.
Where the Republicans have been better at building that farm team in their organization for Secretary of State races, Attorney General races, and that's something the Democrats are going to have to play catch up with. We see that in the Secretary of State, Barbara Sagaski, going to win versus Nelson Araujo. Right. Who knows who Nelson Araujo is, right?
Well, Nelson Araujo was winning that, too. The Democrats were winning all the down-ballot races, even though Heller and Rosen were in a dead heat, and even though the Laxalt against either of those two candidates was pretty close. But they're just not known, and so this outside money is going to be a huge deal. Barbara Sagaski's raised absolutely no money at all.
That was a surprise when you saw those fundraising totals, how little those statewide office holders were pulling in. I don't know if they're not working in it or they just people don't give to those offices, but I was stunned that even someone like Michael Roberson, who's been a real rainmaker in his career, didn't raise a whole lot of money.
I think he raised something like, I probably have the number wrong, I don't have it in front of me, but he raised something like $160,000, but he spent every dime to win. He was really worried, it's funny, about Brent Jones, and he crushed Brent Jones. It turns out Brent Jones was just a paper tiger, put up a website. I think he raised $3,000 or some nonsensical amount. So, yeah, I mean, I just think all of those down ballot races are going to be very interesting. We want to talk about, Elizabeth's telling me we want to talk about Clark County Commission. That's the Tick Segerblum race. There are new numbers in that?
Yeah, we didn't look at the.
We didn't. Let's take a look at those numbers.
We've been in such a hurry to get through all these numbers.
That's another fascinating political dynamic.
Let's pull District E up for Clark County Commission if we can, just to chat about that.
Okay, they're looking for that right now, but that's a really interesting dynamic, Professor, where you have Tick Segerblum, and we're going to see those numbers now. He's up 53-47. I still think these are just the early and mail ballots. He's up 53-47. There may be enough votes out there, but there's not that many votes inside a Clark County Commission district. Here's what happened in that race. You have Tick Segerblum, maybe one of the most liberal guys ever in the history of this state. Also the guy...
Galaxy.
Yeah. Also the guy who got pot legalized. And it's very careless, in my opinion, on Twitter, caused all kinds of problems for himself. And so Marco Hernandez, who works for laborers, which is, yes, a union as well, and then starts getting supported by Sheldon Adelson. What a bizarre dynamic, huh?
It is, and it has to be, you know, that is a very Democratic part of town, so this
Right.
is basically going to decide this race here. So, yeah, you sort of captured in a nutshell there. You talked about earlier about the laborers with Sands on the stadium here, right? We also know that Sands isn't exactly excited about pot as well, so you have that dynamic in play on that one there. But I think this has probably caught a lot of people by surprise is how close this race is, because Sigurd's pretty well known in that area. He's represented in both the Assembly and the Senate for quite a while, what, third, fourth generation politician in Nevada.
So I'm just being told here by Elizabeth's handwriting, which is much better than mine. If I was leaving notes for her, she would never be able to read them. But it looks like Sisolak, if we could get these numbers up, it'd be great too. 1 Douglas and 1 Lyon.
The early vote.
There's in the early and mail vote, and so there's no rural wave for Chris Giuliani. There we have the numbers up there. He won 693 to 600 in Douglas County, and 459 to 307. He's now up 53-37. That's 16 points. He looks like he might win this race by double digits.
Amazing.
Which is a surprise.
I mean, I thought I was going out on a limb when I predicted he was going to win by 5.
Yeah.
So I just meant
you took some
multiples
heat
of
for
5
that
in case.
prediction as well. I just want to say.
What's that?
You took some heat for that prediction
did.
as well. And look at this. This is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he is just. You're surprised too, aren't you?
I'm surprised by the margin.
Yeah.
But I mean, he burned through all that money, and he's been campaigning for what, 2 years? I mean, it's not like.
I have to say,
What are you talking about, David?
and I said this in my column as well. He did burn through all that money. I think he thought he had to burn through all that money. He's now probably looking at his campaign operatives and saying, "Wait a second! You told me I needed to spend $7 million. I could have done this by spending $2.5 million."
But you never know.
But
you never know.
But you can't take a chance.
If he wasn't thinking that before, he is now.
But what I'm saying is, what I said in my comment, you can't forget this either. The atmosphere here in the year of the woman across the country, the Me Too movement out there. Chris Giuliani's the real liberal in the race. He pretended to be a liberal for this race. He's a moderate guy. Sisolak ran a damn good campaign. Yes, we can say "damn" on Indy TV. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh my gosh,
but seriously,
there's gonna be hate mail.
I have to tell you, Professor, I think his campaign started on the right note. He did something that Chris Giuliani never did, which was that he went after Donald Trump right away. And Trump's numbers, he activates Democrats, right? That's what
Absolutely.
happened. And so that was a very smart thing to do. His campaign with his daughters, and we mentioned about that, and Planned Parenthood to go after the female vote. I think his campaign, well, I think some of it was incredibly demagogic in some of the stuff he said about her. It was a ruthless, smart, and very effective campaign.
And he'll be moving on.
And now he's moving on.
And it changes the dynamic in the governor's race, right? And because if you had the Laxalt Giuliani, that would have been a major choice.
Right, conservative versus liberal.
Absolutely, you know, in a state that usually there's this much margin between the gubernatorial candidates here. So now the question is, how does this play out? Does he now move to the center and sort of paint Laxalt as right?
He's pretty close to the center already, isn't he? I mean, some people call him Republican light already.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't think he doesn't have
too far to go.
And you know what? It's so funny when we talk about this happening in a primary race. The Democrats who support him now, they're not going to abandon him just because he moves back to the center in the general in order to be competitive against Laxalt. I mean, most voters are savvier than that. They understand that that's what you have to do. You have to play to the center. Now you're going after those independent, those nonpartisan voters that we talked about earlier, which are a huge portion of the Nevada electorate. So I don't think it costs him one bit. And if he can raise enough money quickly and start going up on TV, going after Laxalt on whatever they perceive his weaknesses to be, it could be very interesting and another brutal campaign.
Well, let me tell you, it's interesting what you said, because I think there's some nuances to what you said. I don't think Steve Sisolak excites Democratic voters in the way that Chris Giuliani does, in the sense that she has been steeped in liberal Nevada Democratic politics for decades. There were people who were going to go out. It's not just social media. You can't tell anything from social media. As someone said to me, I think Michelle Mortensen's going to win because I see her all over social media. That's a terrible metric. But people you just know were going to go out and do anything for Chris Giuliani. I think that there's be some thought that they might not be as enthused, having had had her lose to a guy that some of them see as a Republican in Democrats' clothing. But here's why I don't.
They're going to stay home?
No,
because of Adam Laxalt.
Because of Adam Laxalt. I think in a different situation, I think the Democrats are really activated for two reasons. Number one, because they don't like Laxalt. Now Laxalt has tethered himself to Trump. And number two, and I mentioned this earlier, Democrats are craving a win in the governor's race. They haven't had one in 20 years. And this is what people forget about this, and you understand this too, Professor. The governor in this state is so important, more important than on almost any other state, right?
Oh, it's incredibly powerful. From writing the budget, all the appointments, the guy gets 50 BDRs. He gets 5 times as many more.
Bill draft requests.
Bill draft requests. Right? He gets 5 times as more as somebody elected to the legislature.
And then he has veto power on the other end. Any bills he doesn't like are done, regardless of who supported them.
That's why I think.
And that's just in the session.
That's why. Yes, exactly. That's why. Exactly. And that's why I think this race is so fascinating and is going to attract, again, to your point that you've made a couple times now, Professor, all of this outside money, whether it's from the Republican Governors Association or the Democratic Governors Association, or these mysterious third-party groups that are known as C4s, the so-called dark money. And some of that dark money, I think, will be not just dark, but somewhat, Elizabeth, sandy.
Are you dropping me a hint?
No one gets my jokes. No one gets my jokes.
Sands Corporation, Sheldon Adelson, Deep Pockets.
Yeah. Sandy dark money. I like it.
And then, of course, we also know
Copyright.
Nevada also now has a tendency to split their
forget
tickets still more than most other states, right? We see that election after election.
Which brings up another point, and we should talk about this since the professor's here now, and we should probably let the professor go after this.
Then we will. We promise.
I want to talk about it because this is really interesting.
His wife is
part of it.
Me.
Yeah, Elizabeth mentioned this earlier. 21% or so now that number is very close to correct of what are nonpartisan voters, but the number is bigger. It's going to be close to 30% of the electorate by November is not registered with either major party. So nonpartisans plus the Independent American Party and all the rest of them. Close to 30%. That's never happened in this state. They are going to determine the election. You're going to have the Democratic and Republican partisans and most of the moderates in those parties going, riding for the brand. How those independents split is going to be the big deal, right?
And you have the Bundy in the race too.
That's right. We should not forget that we have Clive and Bundy's son.
We forgot to mention Clive and Bundy.
And I think that's a wild card.
No, I don't think he sucks off votes. How many is the question? And
that hurts Laxalt.
Absolutely.
A little could make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, is it a mosquito bite or is it a knife that draws blood? I don't think. I think it's somewhere in between. But if the race is close, who knows, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now your point is well taken. That's not just happening in Nevada. Across the West, you're seeing these nonpartisan numbers shoot up as people are either fed up with the parties or they're moving into these states and really don't know the history, and that's the easiest choice to make.
All right, Professor, thank you for coming on
thank you for having me.
We appreciate
the
it
initial
so much, David.
Indy TV. You're going to be doing polling with the Latino decisions?
We are.
All right, and you'll be giving the results
first. You'll be giving all the
us?
results to the Indy.
We'll see about that.
See, well, no commitment.
Wow.
Professor, thanks for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
It's nice to see you. All right. We have any new results? What are we talking about next? We want to let you know that we've called the governor's race. We've called most of the major races that were sitting out there, right? The really interesting thing to watch out there now for me, Elizabeth, is that brothel kingpin could be going to the legislature, Dennis Hoff, with a small lead over James Oscarson, the incumbent.
And the other race we're watching is the Story County Sheriff, Sheriff Antonoro. We have no numbers on that, so we have no idea.
I'm told by Natalie that Dion Contine and AD 24 is rallying back, but if there's an election day turnout in Washoe County, let's call up the Washoe County website and see what's going on there. It's clear that there's some new numbers. CD3, Danny Tarkanian is going to win. We can call that race. We can do that based on the early and mail voting. But let's call up the Washoe County website when we can, folks. We have some new numbers for you. That's why you tuned in. You wanted to see numbers, not hear me talk as much. And
or both.
We have Carson City numbers in too. Let's take a look at those after Washoe. Keykefer has Carson City numbers, but he's already won that race because of the Washoe County numbers. Natalie tells me Riley Snyder says that Keykefer is winning in Carson City as well, so he's got that race locked up. But it looked pretty strong for him. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Washoe County. We'll go through all of the numbers in Washoe County.
Let's start at the top on Washoe and
go through them because
that
would have changed some of those statewide numbers as well. Let's take a look at the new Washoe numbers. We're going to get those in a second for you, Elizabeth. You mentioned. Go ahead.
what's the biggest surprise to you tonight, other than you didn't expect Sisolak to
I expect
beat
Sisolak
Christie
to win,
by
but he's winning by 3 times as much as I thought he would. Maybe it'll end up being twice as much based on the time. I gather we're having a little bit of problem getting the Washoe County website up, but we'll get that for you in a second. There it is. There it is. Thank you very much. And there's at the top the Jackie Rosen win. We knew that was coming. That's no surprise. Nor is Dean Heller's huge margin there. Again, very impressive showing for Dean Heller. No worries about problems with the base at all for Dean Heller. He's got to be very, very happy with that showing, even though it was against a bunch of nobodies. Here we go, CD2. So this is a really interesting race. A bunch of Democrats. And the Democrats actually think Clint Coburn can win that race. I'm very, very skeptical, but he looks like he is going to be the nominee. It's still relatively close, but I don't think there are enough votes out there to change that, so he's going to win that one right there and win the right to lose to Mark Amadei, who can go down a little bit and show that he is winning, crushing victory over Sharon Engel. By the way, I should tell people.
I don't think we officially called that race, but Amadei for sure. Let's get a
Susie
green
Lee
check mark
wins
up by his
CD3
name.
easily. Mark Amadei wins that CD2 nomination easily. And let me just say this, Elizabeth. People may not be aware of this. CD2 is Washoe County and a bunch of rural counties. No Democrat in the decades-long time that has existed has ever come closer than 5 points. No Democrat has ever won that. Let's go take a look at the governor's race that's been updated now. Christian Kiliani's increased her lead in Washoe from, I think it was about 1,300 votes at first, and now it's 1,700. That's not going to be nearly enough to make up for Clark County. Clark County is going to determine that race. Steve Sisolak was winning by 13,000. Again, unless she had a miraculous election day, there's no chance that she can win that race, and Steve Sisolak may win by double digits. Let's keep going and take a look there. Adam Laxalt with the crushing victory. He's got to feel very, very good about that too. Dan Schwartz is not going to win. Let's keep going, and we'll go pretty quickly now. Kate Marshall, not interesting. Michael Roberson still winning. Doesn't have 50%, but that means nothing. So anybody who tries to use that against Roberson in the Democratic side, it means absolutely nothing. Sagaski was going to win anyhow. Beers was obviously going to win that too. Yep, he'll be back.
He's been wanting that treasurer's job for some time.
He has.
So
the return of the Beers.
Paid his dues.
Yep, indeed. And he wants to serve with his old friend from the legislature, Ron Knecht, the state controller, who is going to be running against Catherine Byrne from the Democrats. Aaron Ford, we knew was going to win that Democratic primary for Attorney General. He's winning easily in Washoe as well. While we're doing this, I'm hoping that the reporters will be looking at the Secretary of State's website and see if there's updated numbers there statewide. I want to go through again what we've called. We've called CD3 Democrats for Susie Lee, CD3 Republicans for Danny Tarkanian, CD4 Democrats for Stephen Horsford, CD4 Republicans for Crescent Hardy. We've called all of the constitutional offices, I believe, now in those nominees. Tick Segerblom's looking strong, but I don't want to call that yet. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, against Marco Hernandez in that race. And so let's see. I assume that the Washoe County numbers have been lumped in the Secretary of State's race. Elizabeth, we can look at the statewide totals now. I think maybe some of the other numbers have been updated. Clark always takes the longest to update. I'm not sure why.
We don't. Yes, so you'd think it would be the opposite.
Let's start at the top of the statewide and go through them.
Great. A couple of tweets while we're waiting for that to come up. Scott Hammond graciously expressing pride in his friend Danny Tarkanian.
Let's take a look at the governor's race to make sure there's no updates. The Democratic side. 53 to 38 still, so he's up by 15 points. That is not change that I can see, even though they've updated with the Washoe numbers. Elizabeth, Steve Sisolak is still absolutely crushing her. So let's go back to the statewide results page, and let's keep going. None of this is very interesting. We've called all of these races. Keep going. We can look at the regions races. We
haven't done that yet.
These are important positions, and so let's take a look. Let's take a look at there at the details. There, it looks like Laura Perkins is ahead, 33 to 21 there. Jack Mallory, longtime labor leader, is in third. Let's go back, take a look at the next one. And this
unopposed.
Is unopposed. Yeah, that race is not interesting. And Carol DiCarlo is also.
Yes. There we go.
There's another race.
Carvalho and Coates.
Yeah, and she's ahead by 11 points. Very strong showing for her. Let's go back. Keep going down there.
That's it.
So let's look at the what they have listed for the assembly races here, because I think we'll get more coverage. Oh, they saw my water on Indy TV. Does that mean we have to go off the air?
You're fired.
I'm fired. So let's try to get the assembly races up on the Secretary of State's website if we can, and we'll see what's going on there.
If we've missed anything, if you have questions, now's the time. Tweet at us directly on Twitter or use that NV Indy TV.
We will try to get the interesting tweets up.
We'll
yes.
do what we can. We got the reporters on standby. We can look up numbers for you if you want to know about a specific county, a specific race. We're here for you as we count down these last, I think, not too many more.
Well, once we get another update from Clark, we may not have to stay on the air that much longer.
Yeah, we're waiting for Clark County.
Yeah. But let's get those. Let's get those. If there are any assembly races on the Secretary of State's website, I think the Oscarson race may be up there, and let's see if there's an update on that. This is going to be a national story. If the brothel kingpin of Nevada is going to the legislature, there it is. So he is. I don't think we've seen. No, there's no change there, Elizabeth, at all in those numbers. So there are enough votes left out there for Oscarson to make a comeback, but that's going to be tough for him. He is down by 43 votes in that race, getting absolutely clobbered. If we can go down a little bit and show people again the Nye County numbers, he's getting clobbered by about 2.5 to 1 in Nye County, which is really problematic for him.
Interesting that Hoff's been able to make a real run at this. You know, when he entered that race, no one was sure, and I think there were a lot of doubters as to whether he could really give an incumbent, a Republican incumbent, a real run. Obviously, he is doing just that tonight.
He is. Let's see if we can see the John Ellison race, the conservative Elko assemblyman. If that's on the Secretary of State's website somewhere, what's going on in that race? Oh. He is absolutely crushing, and I believe that race ends tonight as well. I know some people were hopeful of beating Ellison, but he is going to win easily, Elizabeth, with 3/4 of the vote. What other races? Let me check those assembly races there as well. See if let's take a look at. No, let's not take a look at that. Let's take a look at the Alexis Hansen race. I'd like to see that one. That's District 32 right there. She is absolutely crushing, 60 to 40. Her husband must be so proud. Elizabeth, Ira Hansen's wife.
Absolutely.
I mean, one Hansen in the legislature is a handful. Two of them, and believe me, she is very smart and maybe even tougher than Ira Hansen. And so she's going to be a lot of fun up in Carson City. She's winning that race easily. I may be wrong, and some of my Washoe friends can correct me, but I believe Franz Way was once on the Clark County Commission, or a Washoe County Commissioner is, or he was an elected official up there, or is, and I should know that, and I feel I'm letting down my Washoe County friends by not knowing that. So let's go back to the Secretary of State's web. Any Clark County updates, folks, that we know of? Can anyone tell me if there's any Clark County updates? Nothing new.
Clark County, you're killing us.
Clark County, yeah. What are you doing?
This happens every cycle. Actually, we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, there are more votes here to count than anywhere, more precincts. We do carry 70% of the state's population here in Clark County, so maybe we should give them a break. We're just impatient. That's all. We want to have.
There aren't that many votes to count. And you know, as much as I like hearing myself talk, Elizabeth, I mean, there's only so much of that we should make people bear, don't you think?
I completely agree
That's
with
what
you.
I thought.
Absolutely.
So it says that the results were last updated in Clark County about an hour ago.
Yeah.
And that's and so that they say 11.41%. The total turnout's going to be, I think, 18 or 19%, something like that. So we're going to bring on in a moment Megan Messerly, who has been covering that CD3 race, to get her take on that outcome and some other things. And she'll be out here to relieve us of talking for a while. I want to hear what she has to say,
actually, because there was some question in recent weeks as to whether Michelle Mortensen, as a local TV personality and very vocal, outspoken one, could give Danny Tarkanian a run for his money. I think most of the conventional wisdom was that if anyone was going to do so, it was going to be Mortensen. She showed up at a lot of campaign events. She was very active on social media. She was very vocal and forceful in that debate that we hosted right here at UNLV between the major candidates in that race. Dave McKeon, Scott Hammond, Michelle Mortensen, and Danny Tarkanian showed up and spoke with you and Megan Messerly for more than an hour. Megan's been to some more recent campaign events even than that, where Tarkanian and Mortensen continued to take nonstop pot shots at each other, really at every opportunity. And so that was one of the big questions tonight, and one of the reasons we were following this race closely was to see whether Tarkanian actually was in jeopardy of losing this primary race. Based on what we're seeing here, in terms of the Clark numbers and Washoe numbers, 42% to 25%. I don't see how she overcomes that, but 25%, not a bad showing in a congressional primary for someone who has never run for office before. Your thoughts, Megan Messerly, and welcome.
And welcome. Welcome to Indy TV.
Thank you. You guys have been doing a great job manning everything.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you for saying that. And if you said anything else.
I know. I'd be fired. You'd be firing another person. Yeah. I don't know how to fire
no one listens to me when I fire people. That's my problem.
I know. We're all still here somehow.
So you're not that surprised by this, or are you?
No, I think we kind of expected, Danny Tarkanian to have a relatively easy time coasting to victory. I think there was still some question in the final days. There hasn't been a ton of polling in this race, so it's been difficult to tell, exactly where things stand. Danny's opponents have been going pretty hard after him. So Michelle Mortensen, former television news reporter, has been attacking him at forums and debates as a perennial candidate, going after him, pointing out his multiple runs for office before, how he has a record of winning primaries, but obviously has not won a general election before. So she's been highlighting that throughout the race. And then State Senator Scott Hammond has put out a lot of mailers in recent days going after Danny for some of the things he's been attacked for in prior races, some of his business dealing, things of that nature. So they've certainly put up a really strong fight against him. But as everyone knows, the Tarkanian name just is well known. It's really difficult to overcome that name recognition advantage that he has, owing to his father, owing to the fact that he's been on the ballot, many times before. He's a familiar name. He's run in this same district, right? In 2016, he ran in this district as the Republican candidate
and almost won.
Yeah,
in a Democratic year, as he'll be happy to. Let me just interrupt you real quickly, just with some results that we just got in the Story County Sheriff's race. Ordinarily, we wouldn't care that much about the Story County Sheriff, but he's become a controversial figure in the governor's race. And Gerald Antonaro, who endorsed Adam Laxalt, has been accused of at least 10 counts of misconduct, including sexual harassment. We have the numbers up there. He looks like he's going to be reelected. He's substantially ahead of Mike Cullen. This is going to be a big disappointment to some people in Story County and to some people in Reno who saw him as a bad symbol, including Lance Gilman and Roger Norman, the developers of the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. So just want to take a break there. Sorry to interrupt you, Megan, to present our Indy TV loyalists with some more numbers. What I thought was interesting, I expected Michelle Mortensen actually to finish in second, as you probably did too. I expected Danny Tarkanian to win. Frankly, I think Elizabeth's right. I expect him to win by even more than he actually is. So I think Michelle Mortensen, because she was everywhere, not just on social media, but she ran a very aggressive campaign. Scott Hammond, though, Danny Tarkanian very late in this campaign went after Scott Hammond. Scott Hammond then got some help from the outside. You can see the numbers up there. He's only getting 16%. Let's not forget, he is the only one running there who is an elected official right now. He is a state senator. You talk about conservative bona fides. he's the father of school choice in this state. Yeah, he voted for that tax increase, which Victoria Seaman, when she was in the race, went after him, and I think both Danny Tarkanian and Michelle Mortensen raised. But I just think Scott Hammond is just too bland and moderate for the hurly-burly of a Republican primary.
I think a couple of different things. So obviously we've talked about Danny's name recognition advantage. Also with Michelle, you can't discount the fact that she was on TV. People know her. She was a known face, at least if not a name. So when people, saw her flyers, they might have said, oh, I used to watch you, actually. I used to watch your consumer reporting. So I think she did have that advantage as well. But talking about Senator Hammond, you bring up a good point. He is the father of ESAs. I think he touted that, and every candidate for him he was at, it was on his mailers. He touted that he supported President Donald Trump's America First policies. But at the end of the day, if you're watching them interact at a debate, Senator Hammond's always the one sort of in the middle, trying to calm things down, and it was sort of Danny and Michelle going back and forth. So I think in some ways that kind of shaped the dynamic of that whole race.
And I want to say something more about Scott Hammond, who John and I have been covering the legislature for many sessions. He's been up there for a while. He likes to talk about policy. He's kind of a policy wonk. He admits that. It's interesting to him. He enjoys it. He's good at it. He likes to get off in the weeds, as we like to say, Megan, when we really get into the nitty gritty. And there's a certain kind of primary voter that likes that kind of thing. And there's a certain kind of primary voter that just kind of goes for the red meat. And that's what Tarkanian and Mortensen were giving those primary voters, was that red meat. Mortensen spent a lot of time attacking the media, more than she did talking about policy or what she would be voting for or against if she were to be elected. Tarkanian kind of in the middle of those two, I think, on policy. He does talk policy a little, but he certainly doesn't mind flaming people when he gets an opportunity. So those two really brought the heat. They brought the fire. As you pointed out, they're more vocal, more verbal. I think a little less policy-centric than Scott Hammond. And unfortunately, in this day and age, that didn't do him any favors in this particular primary.
It's interesting because I think you described Scott Hammond very well, both of you. Scott Hammond's a substantive guy. Whatever else you think of him. And he does understand school choice, and you can talk to him about school choice. You can present him with the pros and cons, and he'll argue about it. But here, and Elizabeth, I'll give this one to you because I don't think Megan knows anything about sports, and she's very proud of that. Am I wrong? Oh, soccer. You know something about soccer?
I know a little bit about soccer. I like baseball.
Okay, baseball.
Angels,
here's baseball.
my hometown team.
The most
Give us a baseball
the most famous Leo DeRocher quote applies to Scott Hammond. Do we know what that is?
Oh, gosh. I think you've got me.
Nice guys finish last.
Oh.
He's a nice guy. Nice guy in a primary where Danny Tarkanian's going to be as ruthless as possible and go after, and where Michelle Mortensen, whatever else you want to say about her, she was not afraid to go after her opponents, right?
Yep. Yeah, we saw that from the beginning. She launched her campaign actually right as a former television news reporter, and her first opponent was the media. She said she was going to expose the lies of the fake news media, and that was sort of how she presented her campaign when she started. And so, from there, I think it was natural that we saw the fire from her right off the bat. So it was only natural that we'd see that directed mostly at Danny, although she did take some jabs at Senator Hammond.
Well, she took some jabs at our own Megan Marshall.
Well, I was about to say
say so.
Yeah.
Did she not accuse you of asking a silly question when you were pressing her on a
liberal? And then she called her a
issue?
Liberal after the fact. But Megan, that was I was very
that was remarkable. It's rare in a debate.
But how Megan handled that on the air was what was remarkable. I'm not sure that whether at Megan's age or even at my advanced age, I would have handled it as well.
There's no way you would have handled it as well.
She was totally unflappable. But I don't want to praise her after firing her. So let me.
You're gonna have to rehire me.
So tell us, since Elizabeth and I have been so busy just trying to get numbers out, what are you seeing out there on social media tonight? What's going on out there that we may have missed? Is there anything? Is there any narrative getting formed out there at all on any of this stuff?
I mean, I think we're seeing what you're seeing. I've been looking up the results and feeding them to you guys.
Thank you for that.
So,
Thank you so much.
So that's been my primary focus. So I haven't spent a ton of time on social media. So I'm seeing what you guys are. That significant gap in the governor's race. Keep keeping a close eye. I was really surprised by that Assembly District 24 race. I don't know if the results are still
That's the Northern Nevada race that's open with
Yep.
Dion Contine.
Yep, that's for Assemblywoman
She left
Amber
the tax
Joyner's
department,
seat.
yeah, for
Yep.
Amber Joyner, who's a freshman who just retired after one term, and
Yeah.
Dion Contine seemed like the favored candidate in that.
Exactly, yeah. She had the backing of the caucus. She had raised quite a bit of money. Even the pharma, Big Pharma, has been running ads in support of her and sending out mailers on support of her. So she's not for lack of support. So I honestly expected her to do a little bit better. Of course, the numbers are still coming in, so maybe we'll see something change there. But the last time I looked, I think she was in third place.
Yeah, she was.
Race,
As I
And
said,
unlike a lot of people running, she didn't get to keep her former job, right? So
Exactly.
she's left her
the
position.
internal
and
dynamics
now,
of these
didn't
races,
win.
though, unless you're right there and you're really there a lot, you understand. That's why I trusted this person. I told you guys from Northern Nevada, an insider up there said, "Listen, you guys are wrong. Dion Contine has no chance." And there's the race. He has no chance. She's probably going to finish in third.
Yeah.
And it's close for second there, but. It's not even close.
Yeah, and Sarah Peters had a lot of labor support. We saw the AFL-CIO jumped in for her, and then Tom Stewart had support from former legislator Sheila Leslie, Frankie Sue Del Papa. So he had the support of a lot of elected leaders, well-known names in the Northern
I don't want to
Nevada
put you on the
political
spot,
community.
Megan, and if you don't know, just tell me.
Okay.
Do we know much about Sarah Peters at all, besides her labor support?
She's an environmental engineer, and she's a lot of labor support. I don't really know. I mean, I haven't had a chance to sit down with her and sort of go through her life history, but she certainly, from the labor community, has attracted a decent amount of support and has been running a really strong campaign up there. So.
Elizabeth, you got some more numbers in, I see?
Riley Snyder just helpfully tweeted that with a few more rural precincts reporting, Sisolak is still up by about 11,000 votes. It's a 51-38 margin then. So again, when we talked earlier in the show about how there would have to be a miraculous way for Christie in the rurals in order for her to catch up, we're just not seeing that. That's not happening.
So there's those numbers you were talking about. He's now up 13, is that right? Is my eyes deceiving me? Is it 51-38? Is that what that says, Megan?
51, yeah,
Okay.
51-38
Okay.
is the margin.
And he's ahead by about 11,000 votes statewide.
Yep.
The Clark numbers, again, we have not had an update in more than an hour. Joe Gloria, our registrar. I'm sure he's watching Indy TV.
Hi, Joe.
Nothing
He's nothing else to do.
do.
Yeah, he's sitting around.
All right. Well, Megan, thanks for coming out. Go back and feed us some more numbers, and maybe we'll get out of here at a reasonable hour.
I think we will. I'm feeling optimistic.
Meaning still on June 12th as opposed to June 13th.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks,
Megan. We appreciate it. Wow, what a night. Interesting.
So let's put up the Secretary of State's website again when we get a second. We'll see if there's any updates to any of the races from rural Nevada, perhaps.
Looks like we've got. I just want to mention. So I like to kind of watch, where are we at with the precinct counting? Benjamin Margeau just tweeted that we've got about 38,000 out of 69,000 votes have been tallied in Washoe County. So we're past the 50% mark, but still plenty more to be counted in Washoe for the races that are close in Washoe. Some of them still a little bit too close to call up there.
And we have not had an update from Clark County since 7:45, so it's coming up on an hour and a half. I'm not sure what the holdup there is, but there were, they added all those vote centers, so maybe it's taken a while. I forget the number. It's like 192 or something like that, Elizabeth. So maybe it's just taking a lot longer for them to compile all those votes or to bring them back. But again, it's actually interesting that most of the major races we already have called. I do think that that Dennis Hoff, James Oscarson race is headed in the wrong direction for a lot of the Republican establishment, which is absolutely petrified of one of their standard bearers.
Can you imagine
now being a brothel
legislature
kingpin
with Dennis Hoff in the halls every day?
Oh my goodness, that is going to be something else. Still no change in those numbers. We'll show them to you once again. James Oscarson winning in the Clark part of that district, the Clark County part, by 65 votes. But losing by more than 100 in Nye County. That's very, very problematic. And you have a third candidate there who apparently is getting, my guess is the beneficiary, Elizabeth, of people in that district just disgusted with both sides of that campaign. And that was one of the things that was bound to happen.
Yeah, there was a lot of attack dog politics there. Some pretty amazing billboards went up fairly early, as I recall. In the cycle, these two went after each other hard, digging stuff out of one another's histories going back as much as 20 years in some cases. A lot of, it's probably the most brutal primary out there, maybe next to or equal to that Democratic governor's primary. But it certainly got heated and even a little nasty, if I'm permitted to use that word. But it's interesting to me that it's so close between these two. I really thought it would tip stronger one way than another, kind of being easy win, and obviously that's not what's happened. They're juking it out for every single vote in that district.
Yeah, let's put up the tweet that we just found from the Secretary of State's office. 100% of the precincts have reported in Carson, Churchill, Eureka, Lander, Mineral, and Story. Results from the remaining counties still to come. So a half dozen counties are all in. They're all small counties. There's not a lot of votes there that are going to make a difference either way in any of the races that we're really looking at. But we should keep an eye on Nye County, folks, for that assembly race between James Oscarson and Dennis Hoff. And we should, once we get the next Clark update, we're going to know a lot about that race and that Tick Segerblum, Marco Hernandez race for the Clark County Commission, with Tick Segerblum, the unabashed liberal, running against Marco Hernandez, put up to run by the laborers, gotten a lot of money from from Sheldon Adelson. So that's going on. Do you want to talk about this debate challenge that Riley Snyder?
I'm still trying to process it. Actually, I'm a little amazed, but yeah, go ahead. I mean,
well, you go ahead. You saw the release. I didn't read it.
It's self-promotional in a way, which.
Oh, please do it then.
I'm a little bit surprised. Let me try to get the print here big enough so my even with my eyeglasses so I can see. So Jackie Rosen wastes no time as she easily cleans up in that primary. She challenges Dean Heller to 3 general election debates, and she specified that she wants these 3 debates to be hosted by you, John Ralston, by Steve Sebelius, who works for our media colleagues over at KLAS Channel 8, and also one on Spanish language TV. She also insists that at least one town hall format is called for. Basically just lobbying, we'll just call it a polite invitation. So
let's talk about what's really going on here, though.
Yeah, what's this all about?
Well, here's what's really going on here. So, Jackie, this is what's known as the first negotiating position by Jackie Rosen in this. She is naming me and Sebelius and saying that we're both experienced at this kind of thing, which we both are. But Steve is known as a liberal guy, and I'm known as a guy that has been critical of Heller. So they figure that if they get 1 out of 2 there, and Elizabeth, I got news from you, I don't think we'll be the 1 out of 2. And Spanish language TV is an attempt to take advantage of the Hispanic vote. Heller will probably present a counteroffer, say, I'm fine with 3 debates, but here's who I want to host them. You know, Wayne Allen Root, Victor Jakes, and
Elizabeth Thompson of the Nevada Independent.
Elizabeth Thompson, who is used to be, as I like to say, in good standing with the vast White Ring conspiracy, but is no longer in good standing.
No.
You are, we should tell people, you and I are both of the same political party, which is none. We are non.
We're registered nonpartisans.
Yeah. There's the tweet that Elizabeth just read from Riley Snyder, who never misses anything on the internet. And it must have killed him to put my Twitter handle in a tweet, but he did nevertheless. And so, as I said, that's a negotiating move by Rosen to get right out of the box and say, here's 2 guys I know you're not going to like. If I get one of them, they'll be fine, and let's do one on Spanish language TV. I don't think that Dean Heller is going to be able to turn down a Spanish language TV debate. Hispanic vote's going to be huge and very important in any statewide race. So we should see if there's updates anywhere in Washoe County. I understand that there might be an update from Washoe. If there is, let's put that up, folks, for everyone to see, because people are watching.
Okay, great.
Okay, so Let's take a look here. Chris June Kiliani, her lead has barely increased there. Elizabeth, it was 13 or 1400 before. Oh, wait a second. It's about 2,400 now, but that's still not going to be nearly enough to make up for the deficit in Clark County. So unless you had a huge day in Clark County that we don't know about, then oh, there has been a Clark update though too. I see, Elizabeth. Let me check those out while we're looking at the. We can keep. Let's get the Clark County numbers. I'm going to look out and see and tell people what they are.
Well, we're waiting for those numbers to come up. Just really quick, what do you make of the fact that she's up by that many votes in Washoe? Why is she able to do so much better in Washoe?
Well, she was expected to do well in Washoe. Washoe people are really upset about the stadium.
The
very upset about the stadium, which she opposed. Let's take a look at those governor's races now. We can talk more about that. He's increased his lead only slightly, but it's significant in the sense that it's still 14,000 instead of 13,000 votes. This race is over, Elizabeth. There's just no way that she's gonna be able to make up that kind of a difference. And we can go through more of these Clark County numbers, but let's tell you what. Let's
the
put
only
up
one
that.
in Clark County we're really still waiting is Clark County Commission District E.
Let's put up the Tick Segerbloom. I gather that he's still slightly ahead against Marco Hernandez. Let's take a look at what those numbers show. I gather he's up by about 2 points, so he can't. There are those numbers. 51.5 to 48.5, so that's 3 points, and it looks like about 200 votes or 160 votes. Do I have that right? No, it's 200. Yeah, 160 votes. Yeah. My math is not so bad.
Pretty good.
Actually, 100. No, I had it wrong. I looked at it wrong. Nevertheless, it's 51.5 to 48.5. He's 3 percentage points ahead. It looks like he's probably going to hold on unless there's some kind of late surge. We don't know where the votes are that are left, but he is ahead by about what he was ahead before. I think that he's going to hold on, but I wouldn't guarantee it. So let's take a look at the Clark numbers at the top. Let's go back to the top of the Clark numbers and start with the statewide, and we'll see if there's been any significant changes there. So. We told you about the governor's race. It's 14,000 votes. Steve Sisolak is ahead. Adam Laxalt, cannot lose, and there's not enough votes in the entire state for him to lose. Now Michael Roberson is going to be the Republican nominee. Again, if the Democrats try to put out a press release saying Roberson only got 50%, he's weak, that's nonsense and means nothing for the general election. Excuse me. Keep going, and we'll see. Barbara Sagaski was going to be the nominee. Bob Beers, easy winner. Just in case anyone's missed these from before, Wes Duncan is going to easily win. Let's keep going. Let's get down. Let's keep going. Alyssa Kadish in Clark County with a crushing win over Jerry Tao. That is what she's going to need. Because even though Jerry Tao says he's a nonpartisan, he is running with the Republicans, so that's going to be seen as the most nonpartisan race maybe in the history of this state. Elizabeth with Alyssa Kadish, a Democrat, and Jerry Tao, a Republican now after being a Democrat, but now he's pretending to be a nonpartisan, which is quite a trick to pull off. Let's take a look at the congressional race numbers if we can get those up. And see the updated numbers in CD3 and CD4.
Yeah, just to look at those margins.
Take a look at those margins if we can. Yep, absolutely. So there they are. Susie Lee, of course, winning her primary easily. It wasn't really ever expected to be a race. And there's the Tarkanian Michelle Mortensen, Scott Hammond win. I don't understand why Eddie Hamilton, who changes his nickname every time, Elizabeth, just can't beat that 1% barrier. Well, you keep trying, Eddie. There's another office for you to run to for some time. But Danny Tarkanian is going to win. Michelle Mortensen, she only got 25% of the vote, but it's a respectable. It is a respectable one. I am told AP called the race for Sisolak. I called the race for Sisolak already. Why are people
off the top of the show?
Yeah, right. Right as soon as the first Clark County numbers came out, my reporters, oh ye of little faith in the editor, I called it for Sisolak. Yes, a long time ago. As soon as I saw those first Clark numbers, and he had a 23 percentage point lead, there was almost no chance that she could win. It's just about the final margin right now. So AP
so
agrees with me.
Let's explain real quick. So Chris G will remain on the Clark County Commission until the end of her term.
I think, yes, till
right?
the end of her term. But I think she's done this time, I think. I mean, my
Is
reporters can correct me on this,
that's right.
but I'm pretty sure Chris Giuliani is done.
But what about Sisolak? Obviously, if he doesn't get elected governor, he stays put as well. But what happens if he gets elected governor? Then he gets to appoint who replaces him?
What there was an appointment. That's correct. And Megan, who is now my favorite reporter by putting in all caps on our internal email that I'm right, and she is done in
Thanks,
in 18.
Megan. She's fact checking the editors.
We have the best team there. We say the words and they do the research, and they make us look good every day. That's kind of emblematic of the Indy, right? They make us look good every day.
Well, they do. They correct us almost at least once every day as well.
That's true. And they actually think they run the place,
and
and they think that for a good reason, actually.
Absolutely.
So let's look at the CD4 numbers if we could. I think you might have to go to the Secretary of State so we can see that. Those are CD4 in Clark County. This is a 6 or 7 county district, though. 63% for Horsford. Let's try to get the Secretary of State numbers. Those will have the rural numbers as well. But I got to tell you, Elizabeth, there have been, so far, very few surprises. Let's take a look. Horsford's numbers are holding across the board, which is a very, very impressive win for him. I've got to be very disappointing for Pat Spearman, who's losing 4-1 to him. Amy Villela, who got a lot of attention on social media with her campaign, and actually was actually turned out to be a very delightful person. I talked to her a little bit after the debate, and she went after me a lot for not taking her seriously. She's a delightful person. She had a terrible thing happen with her daughter, and I have to tell you that she ran a really, really spirited, classy race, and she really believes in stuff. And I think she's the purest liberal in that race, even more so in some ways than Pat Spearman. Although it's pretty close, and so
it just goes to show. I want to say something. So there's a lot made these days of social media, being on social media, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the rest of it, and that's all well and good, and that's important, and that's a great way to try to reach out to people in a way that doesn't cost a lot of money. But generally, in and of itself, it's not enough to just be active on social media, and it's not enough just to have an email list that you actively email daily, which she did. I mean, I actually enjoyed getting her missives twice a day to see, what her issue of the day was. But in a big district, in a primary between 5 people, name recognition goes a long, long way. And having a lot of money and a lot of feet on the ground, which I'm sure Culinary did for Stephen Horsford, that's really what makes the difference. That's what we call retail politics.
That's exactly right. I don't want to stop you, but I do want to take a look at, there's been an update in the Oscarson-Hoff race. Let's go to the Secretary of State's website and take a look at Assembly District 36 and see what the latest numbers show. My guess is that Oscarson probably picked up some ground because he's doing so well in Clark County.
I was
but
surprised.
The Nye County numbers are still ominous for him. So let's take a look at what we have. So Oscarson is now up 43-36. The Clark numbers, he's up by 92 now.
Close.
And the Lincoln County numbers, he's crushing Hoff in Lincoln County. And Nye, those numbers in Nye have not changed, though, Elizabeth. The overall margin is less than 100 votes. It's 91 votes. Depends how many votes are left in Nye. I don't know the answer to that. We should keep looking for the update in Nye. So he's up 42-36, 6 points, but that translates into 91 votes. And it's all about Nye County now. Because it looks like Oscarson's going to keep doing well in Clark County, and there's at least a couple more Clark County updates coming. And so that race is got to be, everyone's got to be biting their nails in that one. We appreciate all the help that we're getting from the team here at the UNLV TV and our own crew that are working with them in the control room. The folks here out on the floor and then running the cameras have been great.
You've been great. Well, I've been checking tweets
Yeah,
and typing with the control room.
And the floor director here has been very patient with us as we've been looking into the wrong cameras all night and looking like we've never been on TV before. Elizabeth and I both used to host our own programs.
Can't tell them.
We look like fish out of water. But you know what?
It's been a while.
This is the best place I can imagine to be looking like a fish out of water.
I agree. We're
and
having
we
so
called
much
all
fun.
the races as I promised before anybody else did. We had the governor's race called right away. We went through the numbers. We've given you the information we think you wanted in as timely a manner as we could. So let's. Have we been getting any? Has anyone been tweeting at us, Elizabeth?
Well, we had an interesting question, and then we got sort of an interesting answer. So, Natalie, I guess go ahead and put that tweet up if you
Do you have results from the Elko County Sheriff's race yet?
So I didn't know, and so I asked the guys at the control room, and so what we're told is that there's no primary for Elko Sheriff. There's only 2 candidates.
So no general,
that are running. So somebody wanted to know what's going on. We don't know yet, but thanks for the tweet, Cat Skinner 78. And as soon as we know what's going on with Elko Sheriff, we'll let you know. Since you bothered to tweet to us, we appreciate that. You guys have questions? I don't know how much longer we're going to be on the air, but if you have questions, now is the time to tweet them. Hashtag #EnvyIndyTV. I'll be watching those.
We will try to stay on the air at least to give you the final numbers in that Oscarson Hoff race, because that could become a national story if Dennis Hoff were to win. But
I never thought about that.
Maybe we ought to.
Oh my gosh, national press at the legislature because Dennis Hoff.
Yeah. Yeah, and
only in Nevada.
And imagine the gatherings, the rallies when Donald Trump comes, and when there are big rallies with Adam Laxalt and Dean Heller and Dennis Hoff. The party of family values.
Amazing photo.
That'll really be something. The Democrats are praying that Hoff pulls it up. Maybe here's something I think maybe we should do, Elizabeth. And this is not just purely let's just pass the time by doing this. Maybe we ought to bring James up here to talk a little bit about UNLV TV and what he's done to help us, because James helped us with the debate too. What do you think about?
James, do you want to get mic'd and
I think James
come on up here?
I think James wants to be up here more than anything in the history of his short life.
Towards the mic. No, we really should. The team here has been outstanding, but James actually has done everything for us, from print out the rundown tonight, help us edit video, ran us through story packages to get us ready for tonight, talked us through the rundown, asked us some great questions that got us thinking about the order of the show and how things were going to go. He's an aspiring journalist himself, I think. We'll ask you when you get up here. I think he's a senior, going to be a senior. Nod if you're going to be a senior. So he's been great. We'll bring him up. I actually do. I always love to get student perspectives and millennial perspectives on these type of conversations. And so without further ado, James Schaefer.
Yes, I've appeared from the night, from the darkness behind the studio.
Welcome to the set.
What do you think of our first foray here, James?
I have to say, for an inaugural episode of Indy TV, this has been quite something.
Don't you think?
And I have grown up watching you, and of course...
Grown up watching me. But this is like the worst moment of the entire night for me.
So great.
No, you could have fooled me, but I want to say that this has been absolutely terrific. And watching you guys talk has definitely, I think, given us perspective as students. I'm no longer a student. I've since left the program, but...
You've graduated.
I've graduated. I escaped.
Okay.
But this has been...
But you're still working here.
I was asked to come back, and when I heard you guys were coming on, I had to be a part of this. I had to.
But before we go on with James, we have to put up this press release that just came out.
Okay.
And that Natalie, you can get... Laxalt campaign thrilled that Sisolak escaped brutal Democrat primary. They love putting Democrat. That's a Republican trick instead of saying Democratic.
Democratic, right.
Tonight, the Laxalt campaign celebrated not just in the Republican, also on the Democratic side. Blah, blah, blah. This is Kristen Davison, who's the Laxalt for... This is amazing. We are thrilled. Voters now get to choose between Adam Laxalt, a leader with a record of real results, and corrupt career politician Steve Sisolak, who wants to take his fringe, failed approach to governing and use it to change Nevada permanently. So that little halcyon honeymoon period between the primary and the general lasted.
It's over.
It
5
didn't last very long.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I got to say something. This is fascinating. So over the past many cycles, usually what we see happen in a situation where we make it through a primary, it's usually the Democrats that are out first calling the Republicans extreme. It's fear-mongering straight up, and it happens all the time. I find it very interesting that the Laxalt campaign is out so quick. They didn't use the word extreme, but using the word corrupt.
Corrupt
is pretty.
That's worse than calling somebody extreme.
They are trying to paint themselves as the mainstream candidate, and Sisolak here as the outlier. That's a fascinating.
It is.
Thing.
It's amazing. They clearly thought about doing this before the result. But what's really interesting too is they're turning the whole career politician thing around on Sisolak. Sisolak spent most of the primary calling Chris Giuliani a career politician.
Yeah.
Now that term can be meaningless, but it's hard for Sisolak to run away from it. He's been in politics a lot longer than Adam Laxalt. Adam Laxalt's been in politics for 3.5 years. Steve Sisolak was a regent. He ran for the state senate a couple times, and he's been on the Clark County Commission. This is some business, huh, James?
Yeah, I would have to say that I think Laxalt must have seen the last-minute dash to the end that Chris G, when she was able to draw blood from Sisolak. I know that there had been reports about him emptying his war chest somewhat to make sure to make sure that his campaign was able to outpace her, which I think a lot of people were shocked by. I think most people that were voting for Chris G were energized by her, but I think they were more energized by the fact that Sisolak saw her as something that was very important as a competitor, which I think not many people expected at the beginking.
So what do you think of, do you like politics, James?
Oh yes, I majored in international relations and politics, and every now and then I like to spout some sort of political garble and act like I know what I'm talking about.
Really? You have a future as a pundit if you just, because all it takes is looking like you know what you talk about.
That and reading the teleprompter, yeah.
The teleprompter is optional,
No
trust me.
tonight. No
So
prompters
what do you want to do with this degree in international relations?
Well, I minored in political science and journalism. My idea was to go into political journalism. And I know that since 2016 and 2017, that field has become somewhat riddled with some, I guess you could say some dismay, you know, with fake news and attacking the media.
I don't like that word. I don't like that phrase, you know.
Well, you know, I don't like it either. But I feel like identifying that problem is very important to overcoming it. And I think that the journalism field right now is an uphill battle. But I think with that becomes a lot more, lots more journalism students become a lot more energized.
You think so?
I
you don't think
so.
Journalism students today, by and large, are discouraged by what's going on in national politics?
Listen, the rise of entertainment news in the 80s to your Entertainment Tonight, I mean, sure, you saw a surge in hard news going in entertainment and sports, and I think that's always been a trend. And I think that that trend is always surge. You're always going to have your people that are more interested to be talking with Mario Lopez than becoming the next Ted Koppel. But I think that
Ted Koppel.
Ted Koppel, and I think that being said,
Impressive.
that hard news in long form in the broadcast medium is making a resurgence. And I think with that, I mean, this is a 4-hour news broadcast.
Is it? Oh my gosh.
Yes. So I think long form news is making its comeback on broadcast television.
And are we setting the
James,
example?
You're
James?
hired, James.
I think so. As long as you keep paying UNLV, I think I will keep peddling that. Yeah.
Very nicely done.
What did you learn tonight, if anything, just from watching the broadcast and watching the numbers come in, listening to John and I talk? What are your takeaways?
My takeaways, I think I've make sure John has water, I think was the first thing, because you got to make sure you keep going.
Did you get enough water?
Yes.
Not quite, but
see, I think you're part fish almost. That's my best guess.
That's right.
But I think, like you said, Elizabeth, learning from you guys, I think it's been the fact that you guys have been able to become fully independent and show that the Nevada Independent is able to stand on its own against other competitors. And on top of that,
do we have competitors?
And on top of that, like I was about to say, not even notice the other competitors. And I think that is the biggest lesson we've learned, is that don't care about what everyone else is doing. Make sure that you are doing what you're doing is what you're loyal to, and what you're doing is, more importantly,
Before we let you go, you interrupt us if anything pops up. But while we have a little bit of time, we don't want to let our viewers go just yet until we've got those last final numbers for you, especially in that Hoff-Oscarson race. I still want to be sure on Clark County Commission seat E as well. I wouldn't mind seeing those final numbers before we let everyone go. You went out to some polling locations today and interviewed voters. We showed a few clips from that at the top of the show, but we didn't show everything that you collected. So characterize some of those comments for us. What did you learn, if anything, from talking to the voters today?
Well, you guys hit it hard. This year, we saw a lot of the middle schools, high schools, and elementaries that ended up having those polling locations for Election Day for the primaries did not do all that well. I was at Mannion Middle School as well with the Heritage Park Senior Center and Galleria Mall in Henderson, Nevada. I would say that the Senior Center really shocked me, but I really shouldn't have been all that shocked by looking at our 65 and over crowd, retirees that are more capable to vote and more often than not more informed than some of those that are of a younger age. That being said, the Galleria Mall, what I saw was a lot of first-time voters, people that had just moved to town, and I was able to talk to some 20-somethings that were coming outside of the Galleria Mall, and I asked them if they had voted. And they replied, shocked back to me, oh my gosh, was today the vote of the general election? And I said, no, today's the primaries. And they went, okay, well, don't even scare me like that now. So I think what I learned is that at least this year, I know we were very worried about there was an extreme warning for heat. We got up to 115 today.
We did?
We did. But looking back to the other primary dates that we had in 2014 and 2010, in 2014 on June 10th, we reached up to 102, I believe. But that being said, I think locals know better than anyone else how to handle the heat and make sure that they do their duty no matter the weather.
Well, obviously they did, right? Because turnout overall, as you said off the top of the show, up just a little bit over priors. Not a huge amount, but if weather was going to prevent people or discourage people, then certainly we would have seen that today. 115 degrees.
Yeah, we had an extreme caution warning.
I was inside all day. I had no idea that it had gotten that hot.
well, I tell you, as someone that went out and recorded, my partially melted camera is doing fine.
Thank you for your service, sir, and your
all right,
dedication
James.
to the Indy.
Thank you so much for coming on, and
thanks for all your help.
Thanks for your help with our debate earlier this season. You were tremendous. You made the trains run on time, and you've been an invaluable help here.
If you like James, if you want to see him again, send us a tweet. Send us hashtag EnvyIndyTV. Let us know what you thought.
And I appreciate that. And one last thing I want to say to you guys is thank you so much for taking up this big responsibility and speaking for a voice I think that wasn't covered. And doing it for as long as you did. And
thanks
as
so
honest
much.
as you did.
Thanks so much.
You. Thank you.
All right, James, thanks for coming on. We're going to go now, I think, Elizabeth, to some voter voices.
Okay.
Great. A couple of our great staffers got, including our great intern Sonny and our newest freelancer Alexander. They went out and got some voter voices, and this is who was at the polls today. Let's roll that.
Great.
Steve Sisolak. And because I support everything he's about family values, and he gives back to the community. He's what I feel that what my family is at home. I feel that he, like, that we can connect, kind of. It's like, he has daughters, I have a daughter. Actually, she's over there. She just voted for the first time. She voted Steve Sisolak too. It's just all about family values, and it's all about bringing back what's real and what's positive to our youth. I don't think that what's going on right now, there's so much negativity, and there's so much drama, and there's so much hate, and we need to get back to where we were. It took us so long to get where we were. And now with all of this stuff going since January, there's so much hate, there's so much road rage, there's so much negativity. It's bad. It's real bad.
So I voted for Senator. I voted for Dean Heller. I think he did a good job in Senate last year, and I hope he continues to do that. And I'm a big fan of Adam Laxalt for governor, and I hope that he'll end up, I think he'll win the primary, so I hope he wins the general election later on. I'd say education is a really important issue, especially in our state that's kind of struggling in education, especially. I mean, we're one of the lowest education systems in America, and coming from that education system, just graduating from it, I could really see that should have a change in Nevada, especially.
Education is a really big issue for me, as I'm a teacher, and I think that I'm in the trenches and I see every day the things that we're fighting for our kids and our families and our communities, and I'm hesitant that people who are up above sometimes don't. I think sometimes they forget what the important issues are, and so education is I think the most important area for me. It's our future, and I feel like that we have to really make sure that we're watching out for our kids. Why?
Adam Laxalt, and I like the fact that he was a DA and he's got a tough stance on crime and knows what's going on from that standpoint. That's most important to me. I think for me it's economic, and gun control is important to me. Gun rights are important to me. So those are the two main things I vote on. I'm a Second Amendment supporter, so I mean, especially what's going on now, you got to get out there and vote.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, those are some clips that Sonny Brown and Alexander Zapata got for us. Thanks for doing that. It's always good to hear from real voters and not just to think about people in terms of just numbers. I want to tell our loyal viewers on this inaugural show for Indy TV, in cooperation with our great partners here at UNLV TV, that we're going to stay on the air here until 10 o'clock. We're going to wrap it up by then. You can follow all of our reporters on Twitter for the final results. Keep checking back on the Nevada Independent site. But we figure that we've tortured you for long enough. We will be off at 10 o'clock. All the major races have been called. The most interesting ones left out are that assembly race between, excuse me, the brothel owner and the incumbent Republican assemblyman, and Tick Segerblom, the state senator, running in a Democratic primary for Clark County Commission. I want to spend what remaining time we have. I'm hoping we'll get another update in the next 15 minutes. If not, as I said, please check out the NV Indy feed on Twitter and check out the site where we'll be updating the numbers that we have. But Elizabeth and I want to spend a few minutes talking about what's coming up in the general election. Neither of them really had primaries tonight, but Dean Heller, the Republican senator, senior senator, is running against Jackie Rosen. Our poll showed it a dead heat. Every poll that's been taken shows it relatively close. What do you think?
I'm going to quote the great Democratic strategist James Carville, who said, "It's the economy, stupid." I think that right now, as things stand, unless the economy starts to slip between now and November, which is unlikely based on most of the economic data that we're seeing nationally and in Nevada right now, that the atmospherics in general favor Heller holding his seat. Because most voters, if they're comfortable in their pocketbooks, if they're comfortable paying their bills, if they feel comfy in their jobs. I'm not saying everyone across Nevada feels that way. We have an unemployment problem in some of the rural counties. We have an underemployment problem even here in Clark County, where there are people working part-time who would rather be working full. The numbers are not glowing across the board, but by and large, we're doing so much better than we were just a couple years ago. Are there other issues at play? Certainly. There are social issues that people care about. I think the immigration fight over a sanctuary city, sanctuary state is going to be an issue because the Republicans are going to make it an issue. I'm not sure that's a winning issue for them, but I think it favors Heller, and not in small part because of the name recognition. The Democrats will go after him, as they have been, on some of his waffling and wavering on issues, but I'm not sure that's all it's going to take to beat him. And he's got a hefty campaign chest and didn't have to spend very much of it here in this primary.
Yeah, I don't think his campaign war chest is going to be that much of a factor, because I think this race is going to be decided, as most big Senate races are now, by outside money. I think there's going to be a ton of it. But I have to tell you, I don't say this often enough, Elizabeth, but I think I agreed with almost everything you said. And I'll tell you why. I think Dean Heller would have lost if Danny Tarkanian had stayed in that primary. He had so destroyed his credibility with the base by his meandering all over the place and looking weak and not knowing where to alight on certain issues. But Jackie Rosen is just not that well known. And Dean Heller's campaign is known for going scorched earth and doing it in a very skillful way. And I think they're going to do that to Jackie Rosen. And I think that Dean Heller may be, actually, you may be right, a slight favorite. Here's something else people might not know who are watching right now, Elizabeth. Dean Heller's never lost a race. He should have lost some races, but he finds a way to survive. He barely won when he first ran for Congress in a Republican primary against, yes, Sharon Angle. He won by 12,000 votes when he ran against Shelley Berkeley in 2012. He finds a way to win. Having said all that, and I do agree with you, and I think there are a lot of atmospherics that favor him. I think the only thing that can save Jackie Rosen is, number one, if she runs a tremendous campaign, and number two, which is going to be very important, the national atmospherics. If Donald Trump's numbers don't get appreciably worse, I think she's going to be in some trouble. If they do, if it starts to look like a blue wave here in Nevada and across the country, I think that she could win. But I agree with everything you said about Dean Heller. He's a survivor. He always has been.
So that term blue wave, red wave, we talk about this in the primaries. We talk about it especially in the generals. It's definitely been a factor here for many cycles in Nevada. So this is our segue now into talking about that gubernatorial matchup between Laxalt and Sisolak. So if there's a blue wave, which I'm not sure there will be, and you pointed out earlier in this program, John, that the really enthusiastic Democrats were behind Chris G. So is there less enthusiasm now for a Sisolak versus a Laxalt? Do some of them stay home? Or do the Democrats have plenty of time to get revved up for Sisolak, because it's not just a vote for Sisolak, it's a vote against Trump if you happen to hate Trump. It could be a vote for or against question 3, which is energy deregulation in the state, which is going to draw out some voters. And there's going to be, what, $30 million at least spent in that question 3 campaign that could bring voters. So I think the Sisolak-Laxalt race is a little trickier to predict for all the reasons I just mentioned, and because we don't yet know, although we got a glimpse tonight of where the Laxalt campaign is going with their messaging, which is to just call Sisolak corrupt and a career politician. We're not sure exactly how Sisolak's going to be going after Laxalt. Those messaging fights will become clearer in the weeks and months to come.
But I think what's really fascinating, your eyes got wide just as mine did when we saw that statement from Laxalt's campaign manager. I mean, what a smash mouth way to start this general election battle. And the first thing that every reporter should do in responding to that statement is say, what do you mean by corrupt? And here's the thing. I told you, and I've told everybody what I thought is that these campaign commercials that were run by one Democratic candidate against the other could be used by Laxalt in the general election.
And they will
Who essentially accused Steve Sisolak of being corrupt by saying he took money from a developer and then voted for houses in Red Rock. It was a demagogic attack, pay to play. And that is the danger for any local government official, especially a county commissioner who has so many votes over so many different issues where there's so many campaign contributions. Pay to play. That's the corrupt angle I think that they're going for. But to do that out of the box and have to make, sure, you have to ask Laxalt, what do you mean by corrupt? Well, don't ask me. Ask Chris Giuliani. She brought it up first. And I don't know if we've seen it yet. Maybe one of our reporters can tell me. Has Chris Giuliani conceded? Has she endorsed Steve Sisolak? That's going to be fun to watch. I doubt she's even conceded yet, since there's so many more votes that come in from Clark County, relatively speaking. But she absolutely cannot win the race. She can embrace Steve Sisolak. But this is, I mean, to do this smash mouth right out of the box, to use the word that we both focused on, and you're right, it's usually someone calling someone extreme. Extreme is one thing, right? You're extreme politically. You're on the fringes of your party. They called him extreme, but I think they used the word fringe in that, and calling him corrupt. Sure, you have to ask Laxalt, what do you mean? And he says, well, look what Christian Kiliani said. And then you ask Steve Sisolak, what about you being corrupt and pay to play? And so I assure you, based on what Sisolak did to Christian Kiliani, in that he is not going to be shy about coming out back against Laxalt. This is going to be some spectacle.
Yeah, it definitely will be, and a hard one to predict right now, so I won't. Let's move on and talk about, let's go to CD3. So we've got Danny Tarkanian with an easy primary win tonight on the Republican side versus Susie Lee on the Democratic side. Now, this is going to be a first-time general campaign for her. Here we're showing the numbers right here again, just to remind the viewers. And I think there's been a little bit of an update, but not much has changed. So Danny Tarkanian, 43%, Michelle Mortensen, 27%, Scott Hammond at 17%. Those are your top three contenders right there. Nobody even coming close to Tarkanian. Let's show Susie Lee's number two if we get a second to do that. So she didn't really have a serious contender. I don't mean that in a disparaging way against Michael Weiss, but she just had so much more money and on the ground help and more experience. She's not an experienced politician, but she has been active in community service and in other types of issues campaigns here in Southern Nevada. So she does know what she's doing in terms of that 68% winner there. So two strong candidates here at one would say at face value, going at each other in the general election. And as you were discussing earlier with David Damore, this is one of the seats that is in this fight for the House, where the Republicans don't want to lose it, and the Democrats don't want to lose it, and they also care about the other congressional race here in Nevada. So for us to have two basically marquee congressional races is pretty notable. What do you think about this matchup between Tark and Susie Lee?
Listen, Danny Tarkanian is so easy to ridicule because he's never won a race. He's essentially become a joke among Democrats and a punchline. But you know, Danny Tarkanian is not that bad a candidate. He's made improvements every race, in my opinion. He can stay on message very, very well. The problem is it's the same things that keep coming back. He has the initial blush of name recognition because of his dad, and then there's so much baggage out there that he has to explain. And he has explanations for the bankruptcy, for the real estate deal, for other kinds of things. But, you know, talking about being able to use stuff from a primary against your general election opponent, Dean Heller, before Tarkanian got out of that race, they were feeding all kinds of stuff about Tarkanian and his business dealings. The same people who were running Danny Tarkanian's race, Dean Heller's race, ran Michael Roberson's race against Danny Tarkanian and put all that stuff out about him. So, Danny Tarkanian, let me repeat this again. Danny Tarkanian almost beat Jackie Rosen in 2016. He came within 2,000 votes in a huge Democratic year in Nevada. Yes, Trump won CD3. Yes, I think that CD3 to some extent leans Republican, no matter what the registration figures say. But Danny Tarkanian almost beat Jackie Rosen in a Democratic year. So, do I think Susie Lee is the favorite? Yeah, I do. But I don't count Danny Tarkanian out in that race at all.
Yeah, I don't either. And again, I'll repeat some of the things I said when I was talking about how I think Dean Heller's in pretty good shape going into this general election. If Trump's numbers don't sink any further, if the economy stays strong, if no meteors fall, on Nevada politically, economically, or otherwise, I think he's got as good a shot as anyone at this. And she does have some work to do. Number one, with name recognition. Number two, with defining herself. Of course, his campaign will be out of the box as quickly as they can, trying to define her. I don't know what that's going to look like. I think one of the fun things will be that I don't know what the the boundaries and the fault lines in this campaign are going to look like exactly. I'm not sure anyone does. I'm not sure these two campaigns do, because Tarkanian especially had to work so hard just to get where he did, to get across this finish line and make sure that he beat Michelle Mortensen, because I think they might have been a little concerned about her towards the end. So there's a question mark for me next to this as well. And we all know that's a swing district anyway, that's gone back and forth through time since the beginning. We've seen it swing in surprising ways. We've seen people hold it for a short time and other people hold it for a long time. It's pretty, not only is it swingy, it's unpredictable in terms of how long anyone's going to stay in place there. So let's move forward to kind of the last big race that we're going to be.
Let me just, before you do that,
sure.
let me just, because some numbers have come out. And,
oh, great.
And this is a reporter from the LA Times put this out, and Riley retweeted this, saying that the Nye County vote is all in that race between Dennis Hoff and James Oscarson. And this is Hoff 1372, Oscarson 872. That seems highly unlikely to me. I mean, that if that's the case, then that cannot be right.
Out of Nye?
That cannot be right.
Let's take a look at that.
It was 199 to 80 something. Before. So I don't know where he is getting those numbers, and I think it's pretty bad to put that out in there. There's not that many votes in an assembly district. That's completely insane. Those numbers just make those. Look at the numbers in Nye right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know where those are coming from. I can't believe those are right. But David Montero, reporter for the LA Times, just put those out. They cannot be. Correct.
I don't see how I mean, the total vote numbers haven't even reached
that's just
that level according to our look here. So I think there might be I'm sure he's a well-intended reporter. There might be a little misunderstanding there on the vote count.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to. A lot of people are going to see that. Out there, I just don't think those numbers can be right.
Withhold judgment on that race.
So we only have a couple minutes left. So whatever you wanted to discuss, we probably shouldn't discuss. We probably should.
Horsford Hardy, CD4. It's a rematch.
It's a rematch, and I think Stephen Horsford will not make the same mistakes. I think he's a slight favorite in the race, but Crescent Hardy is a tough guy to campaign against, and I think he's going to make that a race. But since we only have a minute left, I really just want to thank everybody. But first, let me start with the person I want to thank the most, and that's Elizabeth, who is, I like to say, the heart and soul of The Independent. And she and I have wanted to do a show like this together for so long. It has been so much fun riffing with you and talking to our team and just having a great time. But we hope that you really enjoyed this initial inaugural edition of Indy TV. It's the first of what we hope will be many. We'll be back for the general election. We hope to do many, many more programs with these great folks here from UNLV TV. Thanks to everybody in the control room, and thanks to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, John. So I'll just say a couple things. Thanks for everyone who followed us and engaged with us on social media tonight. We really appreciate that. Thanks again to the crew here at UNLV TV. Everyone's just been outstanding. Thank you, Jen, at the control room. Your patience has been amazing throughout this process. And I also just want to take a moment to say that, when John and I started this and agreed that we would run it as a nonprofit, and that we would run it without ads on the website, that we would not have autoplay videos on the website, that we would not have a paywall, and that we would not require subscriptions, and that all of our content, TV, print, podcast, etc., would be free to every single reader. That's the alarm telling us that it's time to go off the air, the ever efficient. We weren't quite sure how it was going to work out. We had high hopes, and we want to thank each and every one of you who are supporting us financially through your monthly donations. As a sustaining member, we want to thank all of our big corporate donors. We're committed to 100% transparency here at the NV Indy. You can go to our website and look at our donors page and see every single dollar that has been donated to us and who it has come from. And if you enjoyed our broadcast tonight and you are not yet a member, I want to encourage you to support our work. Go to the website. The Support Our Work page is right there. All kinds of ways you can support us, from one-time donations to a monthly supporting membership, different levels, different benefits, including these lovely NV Indy cufflinks. You want to just can we get those on camera? We're going to have Indy swag soon available on the website. Maybe some coffee mugs, maybe some pens, and we're going to put Indy cufflinks up. So get ready to order those, gentlemen. I think everyone's going to need those for fall gala
only
season.
cufflinks. These are These are only cufflinks I wear now, Elizabeth. I ride for the brand. I wear for the brand. And finally, I just want to say, if I can have the final word, Elizabeth, you know I would want it.
Of course.
Again, it's just been wonderful doing this with you. Please email us, Elizabeth or myself. Our email addresses are on the website. We want to know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you thought we could do better. We want to improve. We are fine with criticism as long as it's constructive. Don't say John was slouching too much or should wear more makeup. That's not what I'm talking about. Anything that could make the production better. So for Elizabeth Thompson, for the whole crew of the Nevada Independent, I love all of them, and I love these folks here at UNLV. Thanks to all of you who have helped us, who are out here in the studio with us and are back in the control room. And thanks to all of you for watching Indy TV. Good night.